Always on my no one needs you more than I when you love somebody till the end of time. When you love somebody, always on my no one needs you more than I when you love somebody. I'm singing to myself, obviously waiting for some viewers to come in here. Honestly, maybe I don't even need viewers. Maybe I can just live stream this and kind of talk about my thoughts. So obviously, random stream is random. I was watching this video by Olivia and thought these arguments were garbage. To be honest with you, and honestly, bro, Olivia doesn't miss usually, but she's missing here. So I came on here to randomly make a stream because I could make a video, but then I was like, the video would be long as sin, so I'm not gonna do all that. Hold on, wait. So stream is okay. There we go. Stream updated. Now I have some viewers. I thought I didn't have anyone in here. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about this because again, I could have made a video, but like honestly, it would be an editing nightmare. It'd be really long, lots of clips. Figured I may as well just kind of discuss this with a couple of people. So let's go. The context, my man. The context is my friend here, oliSUNvia. Look, man, I don't know, but she makes some really good videos. I actually like a lot of her videos most of the time. She has a lot of really great points. So the context here is she's supposed to be explaining the difference between abortion and infanticide, and honestly, just her preamble was just trash. I'll be honest with you, it was trash. Absolute trash. And because it's trash, I was like, you know what, man, I literally keep pausing to like literally say out loud, this is not good argumentation. So I was like, I'll just make a stream and just talk about it, because either way, even if no one really watches it, at the very least, like, I'll have these thoughts that I could kind of watch back over and look over again. So without further ado, here we go. Let's watch a little bit of this preamble here.
The amount of
you guys can hear that, right? Let me double check if you guys can hear that. My mic is sick. So like, by sick, do you mean good or bad? Did you watch the video before the live stream? I watched the first 10 minutes of it, yes. Also, eating your headset, huh? Headset out mouth? What? What does that mean? Get the mic out your mouth? What does that mean? The microphone isn't in my mouth. What are you talking about? Do you mean move it away from my mouth? That doesn't make any sense. It's not inside. It's not in my mouth. If it was, it'd be all like. If it was in my mouth, it'd be like. I'm not gonna do that. That's real gay. I know it's gay pride, but I'm not doing that. Oh, sick isn't wicked cool. Okay, I'm getting some mixed reactions because some of you guys are saying that the mic, the gain is too high. Okay, you sound a bit too close to your microphone. Okay, how about this then? Does that sound too close? Is that too close? Keep the audio, dog. Shit, it's hidden right now. The sound is a bit off. It is true. You guys are confusing the hell out of me, I'll be honest with you, fam. Y'all are really confusing me, Brad. I'm so confused. So the gain on the mic is really high. I guess it's because let me pull it down. How about now? Now. Is it good? Is it here? Is it good now? Sounds better? Yo, this is a trash intro. I'm going to be honest with you. Because I'm over here trying to talk about this microphone instead of whatever the heck we're supposed to be talking about. So anyway, alright, you guys say it sounds better. Alright, let's get it on. Let's go, Olivia. Let's go.
Serotonin I get from watching baby videos on TikTok is truly out of this world. It's kind of embarrassing. I definitely want to be a mother one day, and I will smother that baby with love.
If she doesn't kill it. No, I'm kidding. That's wrong. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, okay. So, sounds good. Usual live stream troll. That's a lot better. Good. All right. So, you guys heard what she said there, right? You guys could hear the video? You guys can hear? I need some viewer interaction. I need a yes, no, maybe so. Can one person say yes? Can one person in the chat say you could hear the video? I'm going to slam my head against the wall. Can one person tell me if you could hear the video? Okay, so that was a crap joke on her part, so you can hear it. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Goodness gracious.
But I am pro-choice, and I am personally offended by the fact that you could ever consider calling me a baby killer. You traditional pro-lifers and pro-choicers are full of... So that was Michael Tooley. He wrote a philosophical paper in 1971 titled Abortion and Infanticide, in which he says that abortion is morally acceptable before the development of self-consciousness. Since a fetus does not gain self-consciousness at any trimester of pregnancy, then abortion is perfectly fine at any trimester.
Now, this bothers me greatly, mostly because I kind of concluded that the only reason you would even think to consider self-consciousness as an argument is specifically to allow for an abortion to occur in the first place. I mean, to say that an abortion should be acceptable because the fetus isn't self-conscious is literally condemning it to death for things that are totally outside of its control. It's not something that it can choose to do. It just is a fact of existence that a fetus does not have the mental capacities to recognize itself because it's developing. That's just the nature of being a human, is to develop inside of a female, i.e. its mother. So to me, just the mere fact that you would have to set up a definition of being able to live or have rights is predicated on self-consciousness kind of is so specific, it only exists to suggest that this should be fine. So that's the premise. Let's get to her actual explanations. There was an ad here, so I had to skip it.
A newborn child lacks the immediate capacity to make conscious, deliberate choices.
As common as it is to have low testosterone, it's not
Oh, it's not normal?
normal.
That it is normal. It is normal by definition. If it's common, it's normal, stupid.
Having low levels of...
Anyway, I should talk about young men's overinvestment in testosterone one day, but that's really not what we're here for. So we're gonna skip.
So is infanticide okay?
I think what we're here to talk about is abortion care. What you're describing is something that is already illegal, and there are laws on the books for that. So I'm not a proponent.
But see, you understand, if Dobbs is handed down, the states will be able to make that decision, and there are some that will go that far. You need to be aware of what we're talking about today. I'm out of time. I yield back.
There are laws on the books for that.
Michael Tooley wants to figure out what properties something must have in order to have a serious moral right to life.
The only property required is being a human. There you go. Problem solved. I would say, because I think at this point, the very first problem that we've already had before our discussion began is we did not define what a right is. Now, in my American government class, a right, as I always understood it, was something that the government cannot impede on, something the government can't take away. Now, honestly, that's a bit too loose of a definition, right? Because the government can always enforce a whole bunch of different things, and it's only because we're Americans that we even, quite honestly, have such a capacity or even have the concept of what a right is. It goes all the way back to just the inception of America and it being recognized in the Declaration of Independence, right? The conversation of rights is a rather complex one, and it opens up such a can of worms as we're about to get into right now. So what is a right? I would say an inalienable action or an inalienable ability that the government cannot take away. Well, that's what inalienable means. It means it cannot be stripped by the government. So you have a right to life. That means the government cannot take away your ability to live. You can't just be killed or executed by the government randomly. Can't happen. The pursuit of happiness. The government cannot just make your life miserable on principle. Liberty. The government cannot enslave you. The government can't just be a dictator and force you to do something. So you're right. What is it? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So again, so all of this stuff was recognized in the Declaration of Independence for a really, really strong moral argument to suggest as to why the government up in Britain, the monarchy, should not be imposing its will upon us here in America. Here, us being, the white settlers, or like the colonials and all that stuff. At this point, philosophically, it's kind of all over the place, which is what we'll see as this goes on.
He makes two notes in the beginning of the paper. One, X has rights does not equal X has a right to life.
So I guess this premise can be true, but we first have to define what is a right. Because I guess technically you could have rights, but your right to live would not be among them. But then it'd be an interesting conversation, because it would be, what right would you be able to have that doesn't include being able to live? I don't know.
It's common to assume that if you have any rights at all, then surely you have the most basic right, a right to be alive. But
yeah, but again, what does that mean?
But Tooley doesn't think so. For example, many people think that it's okay to kill a chicken, do a little butchering, maybe even hunt for fun. But significantly less people will be okay with continuously torturing a chicken for an hour. So
now, even if you argue that significantly less people would not be fine with torturing a chicken, it's not a good argument, because it doesn't really challenge whether or not the chicken has a right to live or not. Being tortured means you have to be alive, number one. But number two, again, how does the government recognize a chicken's right to not be tortured, or a chicken's right to avoid cruel and unusual punishment? The chicken can't recognize that. There's no government for chickens. So again, if we're talking about philosophically, we've missed a problem, because again, I understand a right as something more legally, not something philosophically. Whereas she's kind of looking at a right as something philosophically, and we'll see. It would ipso facto also be psychological, but I mean, to get to that conclusion, you'd have to see what she's going to say. I have noticed you, individual. Been a while since I've commented. Let's go.
The chicken has a right to not be tortured, but not a right to life.
Now, based on what, though, is the question. Why would the chicken have a right to not be tortured but to not be alive? I don't know. I don't see where that would come from logically. Why is it wrong to torture a chicken? The only reason we think that it's wrong to torture a chicken is because we think it's wrong to torture anything in general. But why is it wrong to torture something in general? Well, because we understand that it's inflicting pain upon it, and we want to avoid pain. But that's still just a projection that we humans are making to each other. I mean, to one extent, we could even go sexual and say that, someone's a masochist, so if they consent to having torture, then it should be fine. So then that would mean that it's wrong to non-consensually inflict pain upon someone. But then at that point, you're really just being really complex, right? So regardless of being super complex or not, if we just go back down to being really simple here, why would a chicken have a right to not be tortured? How is that recognized by the government? But if it's not recognized by the government, how is it recognized at all? Why are we concerned with the chicken's nervous system to begin with? Why do we care about the chicken being tortured? Again, the only reason people care is because they would have empathy. Because they can recognize pain, they would want to have some other organism avoid it. But again, I would ask, what difference does it make if you have empathy for the chicken if you're going to kill it regardless? I mean, it might be untoward, but why does the chicken have a right? And again, I would ask, what even is a right? Because before we can even get to before we can even really start having this conversation, we still don't really know what a right is. But anyway, let's continue.
That's why people believe in humane butchering and humane hunting.
But the question is, what difference would it make if it was humane if it's going to die anyway? Why do we concern ourselves with this stuff? The only reason we concern ourselves is because we can recognize in other humans, and we're just personifying the chicken. But the moment you dehumanize the chicken, which, you would be doing ipso facto, it's a chicken, not a human, it wouldn't have any rights. You wouldn't feel bothered. You wouldn't be bothered by it.
Note, I'm not sure how much I personally agree with this example. It's lacking details like how severe is this torture? Do I have an emotional connection to this chicken? But I do still agree that having any right doesn't necessitate having a right to life.
I think I can technically agree, but only so far as it's possible to have rights, but one of those rights not be your right to live. I guess technically that could be true, but we'd still have to understand what a right is.
2. Person and human being cannot be used interchangeably.
Now, this is actually a really goofy premise to me, which you guys will see.
Doing so plays in the favor of anti-abortionist positions, which Tooley doesn't want. If we use person and human
fuck
being
that
to mean
chicken.
the same thing, then pro-choice is forced to claim that a fetus is, at least up to a certain point, not human.
Well, yes, they would logically have to conclude that. And I've actually seen some people say that a fetus is not a human, and I just find it to be a rather goofy position to hold, because if a fetus is not a human, what the bloody hell could it be? If it's not, it is inside of a human. It has the DNA of such human. It requires the nutrients of its human. But it's not a human. It's not. So, what is it? Like, and then at what point does the fetus become a human if it's not currently a human? I don't know. Because that's what you'd have to ask at that. Like, if you want to say that a fetus isn't a human, like, you do have to beg, what is it? I don't know. I don't know what it could be if it's not a human. I'm going to be honest with you. If it's inside of a, I mean, like, can human females gestate other species of animals? Because as far as I understand it, they can't. I've never seen a human female give birth to a goat. But I mean, I don't know. You know, maybe I'm just not in that correct timeline. Maybe there's a different timeline where human females like give birth to spiders. I don't know. But I don't understand how you could logically come to any conclusion that a fetus is not a human. I don't. What else could it possibly be? And there's no real answer to that question because it's a stupid question to ask. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. It's a stupid question to ask.
He says that even Judith Thompson, who wrote A Defense of Abortion, the argument showcased in PhilosophyTube's video, makes this mistake. Quote, I am inclined to think also that we shall probably have to agree that the fetus has already become a human person well before birth.
No shit.
Indeed, it comes as a surprise when one first learns how early in its life it begins to acquire human characteristics. By the 10th...
Hold on, I'm going to read a comment here. Even if a fetus weren't a, quote, person, it's vital that we treat it as such because it has the potential to be stripping away that potential... It's stripping away that potential that I don't like about abortion. My friend, she does apparently talk about that. Pro-life's reliance on the potentiality principle. So, for you, my man, I'm going to include this section in this live stream. Hopefully look, I don't know if we're going to watch this whole video. It's like 40 minutes long. But for that comment, she does seem to address that. I didn't get that far. I'm going to be reacting to it rather freshly. But hey, I got a super chat. Prince Revolver, more anime references. I mean, at the top of my head, I'm like War Greymon, and she's like Venom Myotis. I don't know, dude. Like I can't just do that on the fly. Can't do that on the fly. What kind of anime references am I supposed to make? About to hit her with the Hitan Mitsurugi Bato Jutsu, fam, with this type of trash argumentation. Is that what you want? I will say this. Notice how killing animals is more frowned upon killing babies. Yeah, it will particularly... Well, here's the two-step. You know what? I'm going to put a pin, because I'm going to get to this two-step in a second. And it was because I got to this two-step, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to live stream this. So we're going to get there. We're going to save it. We're going to keep listening.
10th week, for example, it already has a face, arms and legs, fingers and toes. It has internal organs and brain activity is detectable. And Tooley is like, yeah, I agree. Clearly the fetus is a human when it has all these physiological human characteristics. It belongs to the species Homo sapien, but
But the problem I have is biologically that would be true regardless. You wouldn't need all of those different characteristics to be a human. If I took a fully grown human male and I cut off all of those different features about it, would he stop being a human? If I cut off his toes and I cut off his hands and I gouged out his eyeballs, I cut off his nose. Let's say we went really gruesome. We're like, this is Saw right now, and I cut off every single one of those traits she had. Does that person stop being a human? Now you'll notice a problem I just said here, right? You'll notice that there's a really big problem with that sentence I just said. And the problem with that sentence is I said, does that person stop being a human? Well, this whole conversation is about what exactly is a person to begin with. Now that's a really now we're just talking about language, but moving that, just put that in the back burner. Without the characteristics of fingers, eyes, nose, toes, it wouldn't look like a typical human. But does it stop being a human? And I would argue no, for two reasons. One, all of those traits were present prior to. And second thing is, I would say that those traits are still kind of mostly irrelevant as to what exactly makes a human being a human being. I think the only problem I have here is a lot of these people are attaching their ability to empathize with something with its relatability to themselves, which is interesting, like really, really solipsistic and to an extent, or really selfish to an extent, because they're only projecting as much value as they can see from themselves. So because you look like me, you must be human too. But that's really stupid, because if I had a human, I cut off his legs, he's still a human. He just doesn't have legs. Like, particular circumstances don't change what makes a human. So what really makes a human? You would say that it's DNA, its structure, more than anything, that it came from another human. It is a Homo sapien. Like, even without those characteristics, it would still be a human. It doesn't stop being a human because you've removed characteristics from it. Like, it would have to have a different DNA structure. It would have to be a different species of animal. And if not species, since you could say that we arbitrarily came up with definitions of species, right? It would have to be a different living organism altogether for it to not be a human. So if I had a human and he was born deformed and he didn't have any fingers, he just had like nubs, is he not a human anymore? I don't think anyone would argue that. He would just argue that he's a human that doesn't have hands. In the same way that, like, if I took the tires off of a car, does it stop being a car? Well, no. Like, the car is the sum of its parts. Like the car, like there are certain definitions of things that require multiple parts working together that I think a lot of people don't grasp. And I think a car is a good example of this. If I remove the engine from the car, is the engine the car? I would say no. I mean, if I remove the tires from the car, does it stop being a car? I would still probably say not technically. It would be a car that can't drive because it doesn't have tires, but it would still require all these moving parts to be like what it is. Like how many parts do you have to strip it apart before it stops being a car? Which I think is an interesting question. I think the answer to that question is you'd probably have to strip off like the engine, the battery, the alternator, the tires, the axles. You would have to break it until all of its pieces are individual first, and then it's not a car anymore. But if a car is missing a particular part, say a car, the whole of the car is missing a part. It doesn't have an alternator. Well, the car can't be functional. It's not a functioning car, but it's still a car. In the same way, if a human doesn't have eyes, does it stop being a human? Well, no, that's a particular, like, it's missing a particular part of itself, but it's still, the whole of it's still human. But if I were to cut each of that human into individual pieces, is it a human now? Well, I would say no, all the pieces are scattered. If I cut you into 13 individual pieces, are you a human? No, the whole has been so separated so that it ceases to function as it was before. It can't even exist presently so at that point. It's like Osiris, you know? If you guys understand Osiris, I don't know if you guys get that reference. I don't know. It sounds like I'm babbling at this point. Let's continue.
Growing thumbs is not morally significant. Whether a fetus has thumbs
Here, how about this? Let's go back
or
a little
not,
bit and get the full
thumbs
context.
is not. It belongs to the species Homo sapien, but growing thumbs is not morally significant. Whether a fetus has thumbs or not does not factor into whether abortion is permissible or not. It doesn't make someone a person.
So then what does? Would be the question. Not even that I would agree that having I don't even agree that like having human characteristics makes the person a person. See, which at that point, now we're just looking at language. Because if I say what makes a person, like we're literally trying to define what person means. So I can't use the word to ask what the word means. So like, what's the definition of a person, right? A person is an individual human female. That's what a person is individual human being, not female particularly. That's what we use the word person to mean. So that person means that individual human. That's what the word means. That's what we all agree the word means because we're speaking English. But if you're saying that a fetus isn't a person, then you're saying that it's not an individual human being, which would then have to bring us to the next question. Well, what is it? So to me, it's like now we have to have, and this is one thing that bothers me about this conversation in general when it comes to people who are pro-choice, is now we have to come up with a separate definition for what it means to be a person. So being a person isn't being an individual human. That's not what a person is. A person is now, well, I guess we'll see what a person is now, actually.
Tooley, a person is someone with a right to life, while a human being doesn't necessarily possess this right. This is because of his...
Now, again, I would ask, why would that be the case? Like, why would a human no longer have a right to life at this point now? Like, it's a separation that doesn't seem like it needs to exist, or it's two categories that aren't really saying anything significant. Well, actually, no, it's saying something incredibly significant. It's saying that you can arbitrarily decide who can live and who can't. That's the significance. Like, the significance of this point here is the right to live is arbitrarily granted. Like, let's go here, right?
Person. For Tooley, a person is someone with a right to life.
So, one, what is a right? Was that we didn't define what a right was up to this point in the conversation. But two, who decides a person's right to life? Now, I can't technically say a person because so what I have to do now, and this is how stupid this conversation gets, is what decides a human being's right to life. So a human being isn't a person. A person has a right to life. But what decides that? I don't know. Let's see.
While a human being doesn't necessarily possess this right. This is because of his self-consciousness requirement. An organism possesses a serious right to life only...
What is an organism?
If it possesses the concept of a self as a continuing subject of experiences and other mental states, and believes that it is itself such a continuing entity.
Now, of course, there's a real big problem with this. Like, a hilariously big one, which is ironic considering this is abortion versus infanticide. Technically speaking, that would mean that a child that is not 2 years old is not a person. Now, I don't know what it is, but it's not a person. Because a 2-year-old child wouldn't be self-conscious. Like becoming self-conscious is a really interesting thing. It's actually kind of really hard to recognize it in a child. Like it takes a minute for it to really develop that it has a sense of self independent of that it's developing that stuff. And it's really hard to kind of track for one. But for two, how would we even decide that a baby is self-conscious? I mean, the reason why we can decide that other humans are self-conscious is because they can articulate, information between each other, right? And eventually, like a 2 to 3 year old, they'll start saying words. They'll start recognizing patterns. So they'll be able to start remembering things, right? So at a certain point, we can see, like to 2 to 3, that this creature, whatever it is, because it's not a person, this human being, okay? So this human being has to become a person because it has to gain self-consciousness. But again, there's a really big hole here because that means if I want to use this logic, I can kill that thing with impunity up to this point. I can just kill it. because it has no right to life until it starts like learning language, until it can start remembering stuff. Now I can't kill it, which to me is a little interesting that's a position that someone would want to take. But okay, okay. Actually, feral android. So it's okay to kill people when they sleep. Huh. So that means if you're asleep, I guess technically you wouldn't be conscious if you're sleeping. What if I knock you out? Because if I knock you out, you're not going to be self-conscious. But maybe if I can play devil's advocate, perhaps by self-consciousness, it means generally speaking, that organism has to be able to have experiences. Because even if I knock you out, there's still a history of your existence. And that's kind of one thing that I've noticed about this conversation with abortion, actually, which most people don't articulate. But one of the biggest reasons why people are usually fine with abortions is because a fetus doesn't have like a history to it. Like there's as he said here, possesses the concept of itself as continuing subjective experiences and other mental states, and believes that it itself is such a continuing entity, right? So basically what it's saying is that, like, because a fetus doesn't have a history of living, we can stop it from being. Like there's no change in game state. Because he didn't get to be a human, it's okay to stop it from being a human at all. Which I think is a little fucked up, I'll be honest with you. But I think that's what it seems to be the case.
Now, why does...
Micro. Yeah, no, she is explaining the positions from the paper. I don't really... She says she's pro-choice. I assume she agrees with this stuff. I assume.
Does he say self-consciousness is the deciding factor for personhood? Well, he says a right is basically a desire someone has that others have a prima facie obligation to avoid getting in the way of.
Why? Let's pause here. So now we finally get to
As a right is
the definition
a
of
desire.
right. So we finally get a definition of right, which you should have started with, but I didn't make the video. So a right is a desire someone has that others have a prima facie obligation to avoid getting in the way of. Why? Why would anyone have an obligation to someone else's desires? Why do I have an obligation to not get in the way of it? I don't really... Hold on. Let me see. Let me first find prima facie. What is that word? What does that phrase mean? We'll learn today. So, prima facie means based on the first impression, accepted as correct until proved otherwise. So, a desire someone has that others have a, based on first impression, obligation to avoid getting in the way of. Well, I don't understand, like, what obligation do humans have to not get in the way of someone else's desire? What happens when your desire is to literally, like, set a building on fire because you like flames? Like, why would I not have an obligation to avoid getting in the way of that? I guess that might be extreme, but I mean, like, let's say you want to live. I mean, I guess I would have... But again, I'm trying to figure out, like, why would I have an obligation to avoid getting in the way of you doing anything? Like, who decides that? Let me see. Yeah, horrible. Yeah, I do think this is a bad definition for a right. Maybe you guys can explain this. So a right is something inherently granted you by your creator as an individual. It also cannot be something which relies on another person's work or label, like schooling or medical. No, I would agree, because well, that's the thing. A right is actually a rather Christian ideal, which I think is actually really interesting, because again, rights were first recognized by our creator in the Declaration of Independence. It's actually, I think, historically it might be one of the first times a right is expressed as so. I think you'd have like laws and whatnot, but for something that cannot be impeded on, I think the Declaration of Independence was one of the first time. It's again one of the reasons why America, is such a like unique country in general. Just number one.
because other countries don't have quote unquote like recognized right. Well, that's not true. I think at this point they do. I think other countries at this point do have different rights in like constitutions. But if we go all the way back historically, I think one of the things that just makes America so special is because we created a government that had no choice but to recognize there's just certain privileges and just certain things that it just can't do. But as far as this definition goes, desire someone has that others have a obligation, a first impression obligation to avoid getting in the way of. I mean, at that point, I would still say a fetus kind of has a desire. Well, I mean, I guess a fetus can't have a desire because it can't be conscious. So a fetus ipso facto, based on its existence, cannot have a right. Now, to me, that seems a bit goofy. Because one, it kind of defeats the entire purpose of parenthood. Like, the entire purpose of being a parent is to protect a child that cannot fend for itself. That's why that's one of the reasons why I think humans are probably great as a species, is because we spend so much time actually investing in our children. Like, we spend so much time protecting them. But that's kind of the entirety of what parenthood is. The entirety of parenthood is taking care of something that can't take care of itself. Of which I think would extend to as a fetus. Like, because a fetus cannot be anything than what it is, as a parent, we have an obligation to it because we created it. Like, we gave it its existence. My sperm, that woman's egg cell, allowed the chain reaction to get it to this point. To say that it doesn't have a right to be alive because of its natural state of existence, for one, doesn't really seem just or fair to me, because you're judging something based on arbitrary characteristics, which is kind of honestly not unlike racism. Like a black person isn't a person anymore because they're black. Like, if we just take it all the way back then, it's an arbitrary disposition it has that cannot be controlled, and thus you don't have a right to be, despite the fact that you can recognize all these different stuff as a human. Like, you can participate in society and exist and reproduce as such. You're still not technically a human according to a racist person, at least at the time, or a black person isn't a person, despite, again, being able to reproduce sexually with them, which honestly is kind of weird that they would conclude that black people aren't people and then have sex with them and then like create hybrids. Like, I don't know. That's a little stupid to me, honestly. But I guess racism isn't supposed to be logical. But at this point, again, it's taking something that's incredibly arbitrary and saying that you can't, or not you, but a fetus can't have a right because it is a fetus. But to me, that seems really roundabout, because you wouldn't take this argument and apply it in any other situation. You would never take this line of reasoning and apply it anywhere else, which I'll show you in a second, actually.
Someone has that others have a prima facie obligation to avoid getting in the way of. But of course, that desire has to belong to something conscious. I mean, it would be weird if we could say that phones have a right to, as one.
But then here's my question. To what extent could you say that a lizard is alive? I mean, well, that a lizard can't be a person, I guess. But I mean, if a lizard has a desire to live, I mean, to what extent is it conscious, though? I mean, a lizard would still have that desire. I mean, any animal, for the most part, with the exception of humans, actually, typically have a desire to stay alive, though, you know? I don't know. I think, but I mean, to be fair, any animal would still have that desire to live. That's why they fight to do so. But they're not conscious, so I guess they're not people. That would make sense. Maybe it would make more sense to say they're not people because they're not fucking humans, but, maybe that's me making too much sense.
One Direction once eloquently said, "Get some," because they desperately search for holes to fill when they're low on battery. And right to life doesn't concern continued existence only in a biological sense. If there was some future technology that suddenly planted entirely new memories, beliefs, and personality traits into your brain, surely your right to life has been violated. Yes, you have the same physical body.
What she said here is, but are you really you?
It doesn't seem to be your life anymore.
Now, this example is a little strange to me, and I'm not sure what point she's making here. Because if there was a world where your memories, beliefs, and all of that could be just swapped out, the person you were would cease to exist entirely. So it really would be a question of, like, was your right to life, like, impeded on? You would essentially be dead in a sense. Like, the consciousness of what that thing is now gone. It's erased. It's a different being altogether. So, like, why, I don't know what point she's making here. Maybe I'll have to re-listen to it.
Right to life has been violated.
So-
And personality traits...
So she's saying, okay, so my desire to live has been violated because I am no longer the person I once was,
to your brain.
would be what she's essentially trying to say. But to that extent, I guess so. I mean, I guess because I'm dead, I don't exist anymore. If my memories and my person, if that's not me anymore. So I guess that is, in a sense, death, right? So she's basically, that's a roundabout way of saying someone just killed you.
Surely your right to life has been violated. Yet,
Which is interesting, because I wonder why she just didn't say someone just killed you. I don't know why you would need to create this scenario.
yes, you have the same physical body.
But are you really you, is what she's saying.
It
here.
doesn't seem to be your life anymore.
Well, because you'd be dead.
Your life ended when every psychological and mental aspect of you was erased.
Yeah, so I'm dead. So I guess that would be true. My right to life would be impeded on because I'd be dead.
Thus, what we really care about is the continuation of mental states and experiences.
Which is really spiritual and to that extent, which is really interesting because we're not supposed to invoke, the creator and spirit and spirituality here.
As I'm editing,
But I also don't really even think that that's entirely true. That what we really care about is the continued experience. I think that that's what we would be saying in order to avoid the principle of not killing another living organism, or in this extent, it would be to avoid acknowledging the principle of not killing another human being. That's kind of one thing that we all have to agree on in a society, is that you can't randomly kill other human beings. And thus, in order to accept abortion as something fine, you would have to argue that a fetus is not another human being, which is exactly what this has been. This is exactly what this is arguing that a fetus is not a human being, or rather, is not a person. So, because it's not a person, legally, it should be fine to kill it. Because if you argue the principle, which actually, technically speaking, this actually wouldn't be arguing the principle. In fact, if you were to argue that it is wrong to kill another human being, personhood is irrelevant. So there's no point in actually discussing what makes a person, because we already acknowledge that it's a human being. So there would actually be no point in giving way to this argument at all. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a person, it's still a human. And to that extent, if it's a human and it hasn't done anything wrong, let's say we add that caveat, it has done nothing wrong, it's a human, it's wrong to kill it. I mean, you can make that argument. So I would like to see some counter arguments to that. But as far as arguing personhood, I would honestly say that it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether or not it's a personhood. It doesn't matter whether or not it's conscious or unconscious. What matters is whether or not it's a human, and that we have a principle to not kill it without just cause. So then the next part of that conversation would be, well, what's just cause? All right, well, we could discuss that. But once we accept the premise that it is a human, I don't see why personhood is relevant. But maybe I'm stupid. Let's see.
I realize I want to explain this point a little further. Why does physical form not dictate a right to life? Why is it that just because a fetus looks human doesn't mean it's now morally equivalent to a born child?
Yeah, but again, I would still argue what difference it makes whether it's born or unborn, though. I mean, it's still a human. What you're being is arbitrary based on its current state of development. But we can't control that as humans. It's just a natural consequence of its existence. So we've judged that it doesn't have the right to live based on an arbitrary state of its existence. That's the long and short of that.
And to me, again, I would say, like, to what extent do we as humans have that right to kill another human based on what point in its life it's in? I don't know. I don't think that as humans we should have that power. I don't see what would grant us that power. Certainly we'd have that ability, but I mean, like, what gives us that power, that legal right? I don't know.
And it has fingernails.
Well, if my mom suddenly turned into a tree, but kept all her memories, her beliefs, her need to know everything my sister and I talk about, I wouldn't be like, my mom's dead because she doesn't have a liver anymore. No, I'd consider my mom as still alive. She doesn't have a human heartbeat, she doesn't have eyes or lips, but she's got her mental and psychological traits.
Now, this does beg an interesting question. How does your mom still have her mental psychological traits if she doesn't have a brain? Now, it would be true that your mom is still alive because a tree is a living organism, but your mom's not a human. And if human rights are predicated based on being a human, then your mom doesn't have a right to life. I mean, we could logically conclude that. I mean, your mom's a tree now, so, I mean, tough, but unless you can break the curse of which made her a tree, you know, she's not a human, so.
And that's what matters. And then I'd probably go on some long magical journey trying to turn the tree back into my mom.
But my question is, like, why is it, and again, this becomes really spiritual at this point. If you're saying that what really matters is your mom's memories and, like, mental state, right? You're saying what really matters is her soul or her spirit. It's the consciousness that she has that really means something. And so you can only be a human with this consciousness. Like, and again, like I said, that's really, really spiritual and kind of religious, which is interesting to me that this is an argument that would be made. Because honestly, to what extent can you even say that other humans have a consciousness independent of your own? Which, I mean, I guess that's real complex, and honestly, it doesn't really need to be discussed. But I still want to kind of point out that at this point, you know, we are talking about your mom's spirit, not your mom as a human.
But, like, someone tries to cut down the tree that is my mom and I'm protecting it, like, no, that is my mom, not an actual common tree. Anyways, I suspect some people might go into the comments and say, oh, what a stupid example. It's actually biologically impossible for humans to live without a brain or heart. This is a false.
Well, no, it's not just that, but your mom wouldn't be a human. I mean, if someone were to make this comment, it is a stupid comment in and of itself, because it's not we're not talking about a human anymore. We're talking about a tree. We're talking about a tree that has a spirit inside of it.
It's a common logical fallacy, and I can't believe you don't know that as a philosophy student. Yes, I know that according to biological laws, we cannot have psychological states without our vital organs. But thought experiments don't have to, and usually.
Now she's explaining the thought experiment, which is unnecessary. She doesn't need to explain that humans have an imagination. Like, I think that this would be, again, if anyone were to comment that, they'd be missing the point number one. But which her greater point is that what matters about humans is the consciousness that they have, not the body parts that they possess. And I would disagree wholeheartedly, because if the characteristics of being a human is predicated on your DNA and your body parts and the sum of your parts, if being a human is predicated on the sum of all that you are, then if you're a tree, you're not human. Which sounds really remedial and stupid, because it is. That's what makes this kind of argument kind of problematic. It's like, if your mom is not a human anymore, then she doesn't have human rights. That's the long and short of that. And it could be anything. If your mom turned into a telephone pole, then she's a telephone pole. If your mom turned into a dragon, then your mom's a dragon, right? Like, I mean, to that I mean, it kind of goes without saying. I'm sorry.
Aren't confined by what's possible according to physical laws of our world.
What's
they are
up,
to check
MGTOW?
our reasoning,
By
which is
logic?
governed by laws of reason, not physical laws. I'm kind of
We can skip
someone
this.
with a right.
Oh, wait, hold on.
So, editing Olivia is signing off. Okay, so someone with a right to life.
As common as it is to have low testosterone, it's not normal.
This is stupid. It is normal. If it's common, it's normal. That's stupid.
Having low levels of testosterone is a symptom
To life is someone who desires to continue existing as a subject of their own experiences and mental states.
So again, like this definition only exists to argue that a fetus doesn't have a right to life. Now, here's the two-step I was talking about. If you guys are still here, if the people I mentioned this to are still here, you would have to realize that if this is logically true, that would mean that any pregnant woman's fetus, could be killed, and it wouldn't have a right to life. Like, you could kill any woman's fetus, and it doesn't matter if she wants it or not. It doesn't have a right to live. Because regardless of whether or not she wants it, it's not a conscious being. But would that hold up in court? Would that hold up to any person? And if you guys have been here, right, since the top, and I know I've obviously been talking and breaking this down, but let's say we agree to these premises, that a fetus is not a person, because it is not someone who desires to continue existing as a subject of their own experiences and mental states. Well, then that means you could kill any fetus, because that would be true regardless of whether or not the person wants it or not. But would you defend that conclusion? I don't even know if she would defend that conclusion, which is interesting to me. So let's see what she says.
The question is, can a fetus do this? And the answer strongly seems to be no. A fetus cannot desire continued existence as a subject of its own experiences and mental states because it has no idea what continued existence means and no consciousness of itself as a continuing entity.
So could I logically kill any fetus? I mean, she would have to answer yes. Logically, then no fetus has any right to life, and I could kill any fetus, irregardless of if the woman wants it or not. So my question is, why can't I do that? Like, if I see a pregnant woman, why can't I just punch her and just kill her child right there? I mean, it's not a human, so it's okay. I don't know.
The ability to desire itself as a continuing entity. Tooley says a fetus has no right to life. Immediately, some of you might say, well, sometimes when people are hitting absolute rock bottom, they may not desire to live. Do they now?
So no, I did think this actually as my first watch through before I became live, that technically speaking, you would say that any suicidal person also does not have a right to life. But again, if I were to kill someone and I then said, well, they were suicidal, so I mean, I did not commit any crime, they didn't have a right to live anymore, that would not hold up anywhere. No, that wouldn't hold up anywhere. I mean, like, first of all, assisted suicide is currently illegal as it is right now that I think about it. I mean, attempted suicide, I think, in a lot of states is illegal. So, I mean, you don't even have a right to kill yourself, let alone other human beings. But, I mean, a fetus isn't a human being, so it's some other thing that's not human, that just grows inside humans, and then somehow becomes a human at some point in time. I don't know.
Lose their right to life? Tooley says no. There are 3 situations where a person may not desire a right, but their right must remain upheld nonetheless.
But that's ridiculous, because if a right is personal to the individual's desire, then how can we uphold it? In fact, to that extent, a right is only as subjective as the person that's feeling it. And if that is the case, then like rights have no value to other people.
1. Situations in which an individual's desires reflect a state of emotional disturbance. So if a suicidal patient tells their therapist, I don't really want to live anymore, and the therapist is like, cool, do your thing, and lets the patient take their life, a right to life was still violated here.
Because, okay, let's see how.
2.
Wait, but how? I mean, based on the premises, no, it wasn't. The person didn't have a desire to live anymore. What right was violated?
Situation.
Hold on.
Their therapist is like,
Let me
and
see.
tells desires
So situations in which an individual's desires reflect a state of emotional disturbance. So now we have to add the caveat that, but hold on. Maybe I'm stupid. So we look at our definition. A right is one's desire for something that should not be impeded by another person. But if I am that person, am I another person? Okay, I can't say person because the definition of person is someone that has rights. No, a definition of a person is someone that has a consciousness. Okay. So, okay, all right. Maybe I'm stupid. Situations in which an individual's desires reflect a state of emotional disturbance. So if a person is suicidal, even though they don't have that desire, because it's predicated based on how they feel emotionally, it's not okay if they kill themselves. I don't see based on what, though. I mean, why does it matter if they're in an emotional disturbance? They still wouldn't have a right, technically. I mean, they still technically wouldn't have a right based on that definition. See, but hold on, let me see. See if I can go back to this. Okay, okay. Maybe I misunderstand what a right is.
For necessarily possess this right. This is right to life experiencing entity. Now, why does he say self-consciousness is the deciding factor for personhood? Well, he says a right is basically a desire someone has that others have a prima facie obligation to avoid getting in the way of.
So if that be the case, and the person does not have a desire, does that mean they don't have a right? I don't know. Because honestly, I don't think based on these premises you could conclude that you can stop a suicidal person. Because it's all predicated on their desire. Even, I don't see what difference does it make if it's caused from emotional, like, disturbance. They still don't have the desire anymore. Are you saying that they can't trust their own consciousness anymore because they're not being rational? I think that's what you'd have to say. I don't know if I'd even disagree with that technically. Situations where the previously conscious individual is temporarily unconscious.
The conscious individual is temporarily unconscious. When we're unconscious, we have no desires. But that doesn't mean it's suddenly okay to murder people in their sleep.
Okay, there you go. There's your answer, viewer.
3. Situations in which an individual's desires have been distorted by conditioning or by indoctrination. If someone tells you, dude, you gotta stab me to death in exactly 7 minutes and 8 nanoseconds because the prophet on Spadina just told me that everyone dead at 6:66 p.m. gets beamed up straight to heaven, stabbing them would still be a violation of their right to life.
I don't think that example made sense. Because you'd still be murdering them regardless. It wouldn't matter if you had convinced them of anything or not. You'd still be the one taking their life.
I think most pro-choicers would agree with Tooley up until now, or at least find nothing horribly wrong. But here's where we start to get a little cray-cray. Tooley moves on to reject the validity of all the popular cutoff points in abortion discussions: conception, the attainment of human form, mobility, viability, and birth. I'm going to focus specifically on why Tooley rejects viability and birth, since those are the most liberal views on abortion. And thus, if liberal positions can defend against his objections here, it gets rid of all the earlier cutoff points. Tooley argues that birth has no moral relevance because it's just a change in location.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Whether the baby is inside the womb or outside it, whether it's physiologically dependent on its birth giver or not, does not change the baby's ability to be self-conscious, and hence does not change its right to life.
He would be correct. I'm glad you came to the same conclusion.
Quote, consider a speculative case where...
But then again, that would mean that you could just kill babies.
Where a fetus is able to learn a language while in the womb. One would surely not say that the fetus has no right to life until it emerged from the womb or until it was capable of existing outside the womb. A newborn baby still fails to meet his self-consciousness requirement.
Yeah, so
So I could kill it then, right?
And so, if we agree that aborting a viable unborn baby is okay, then having that baby go from inside to outside makes no difference.
Yeah, that would be true.
Infanticide is morally acceptable so long as the baby has no self-consciousness. Now, before
Yeah, you would have to that is the correct conclusion to make.
pro-lifers cheer at their seeming victory, Tooley also thinks y'all wrong, even
If only you niggas could see my face.
more so than pro-choice.
Oh, more so. No, I'm really interested.
Sorry, no one gets a break from him. He says that the conservative position may seem easier to defend. For one, they don't have to choose a morally arbitrary cutoff point.
Yeah, they would argue in principle. Principle meaning the definition of that something that has to be agreed upon and defined with logical terms. Because otherwise, again, you get to this point where you're just being arbitrary. We're just saying it's more based on the whims of something rather than something that has a clear definition
Of a fetus's development, and they don't have to specify what properties grant a right to life.
Well, yeah, because you're a human. There you go. Again, because they would be arguing in principle. Like, this is all a bunch of globbly-gloop and like sophistry. Like, you have to create a whole bunch of like different states of existence to defend this point. And the unfortunate reality is none of this stuff is based like in a strong principle of something that you could really defend. Because again, like you said, well, yeah, I say like you said, like I'm talking to Olivia, or what, Tooley is saying is that you could kill any child up to a point before it becomes conscious. And it would be all the same. They have no right to live.
Say that
In fact, it wouldn't even make any difference if they were a fetus or if they were 1 year old. They're not conscious, so you could kill them. That's just a change. That's just a change in time and location. So basically, okay, so instead of 6 months, it's been 12 months. Oh, still not conscious. I can kill him. I mean, there really wouldn't be any counter argument to that now that I think about it. Not based on this.
that there is some property that all adult persons have. They don't know exactly what it is, and they don't have to. There just is a property, and this property...
Well, the property is being a human. The property is the sum of the parts of the DNA, its point of origin, and its continued existence. Genetically, it is a human that is developing. So it doesn't have all of its characteristics in principle that it is developing. It has to gain those characteristics, but it doesn't make it less human. That's just the stages it has to go through to become what it is. It has to do that. It can't do anything but that. But to say that it's not a human begs the obvious question, well, what is it? And there's no real answer to that question. It's a human.
Bestows a right to life upon any organism that has it. Crucially then, anti-abortion positions rely on the potentiality principle. Quote, any organism potentially possessing that property has a serious right to life even now, simply by virtue of that potentiality.
Now, the thing is, I've never made, and actually, I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure I have made the argument that because the fetus will become a conscious, fully grown human being, to stop its its development is morally wrong. But I don't think at this point I would need to. If I argue the principle that the unjust killing of a human being is wrong, and a fetus is a human being because it cannot be anything but that, it is morally wrong to kill it. Which is a pretty simple argument. It's a very simple, premise 1, premise 2 type argument, conclusion. But unless you can argue the principle, unless you can counter argue the premise that one, of a fetus is not a human being, which, let's... Again, I would like to see someone counter argue that it's not a human. But 2, you would also have to argue that it is okay to kill a human being without just cause. So it's okay to arbitrarily kill humans. So you'd have to defend that. You'd have to logically argue against that first premise as well. So to me, I don't think it matters whether a fetus has potential or not. The fact that it is 1, a human, and 2, you cannot kill humans without just cause. There you go. Abortion's wrong.
Plain and simple. I mean, Now, even if you were to add, but see, because then I would imagine that someone would argue, well, what if the mother's life is in danger? And then I would say, okay, so you can kill a human being with just cause. And I mean, if the fetus were to continue to develop, and it would kill its mother, then the fetus itself would die as well. At that point, you just have a net loss of 2 humans. But considering the fact that the vast majority of abortions are not caused because the fetus is a danger to the mother's life, to argue particular circumstances kind of obfuscates the main point. So if you want to argue a particular circumstance in this sense, I would say, yeah, you probably would need an abortion. Not because you would want it, but because you need it. You will die otherwise. Now, at this point, when in human technology, we have like a lot of medical, technology, a lot of different ways of which we could save people's lives. I mean, who really knows if the mom's life really is in that much danger based on the technology we have? I don't know. Again, that's a particular circumstance. But if we're arguing like just based on like logical definitions and just realities, right? Just if we're arguing on the principle that X is wrong, then particular circumstances doesn't change generally what the issue is. I think generally the issue is you don't kill a human being without a good reason. But I think a danger to the mother's life would be that good reason, would be that just reason. So to that extent, I mean, my argument still isn't defeated. You would just be providing the just reason, which I don't think anyone would be happy about. Like I don't think anyone's gonna, oh yay, the woman's gonna die. So I don't think anyone would be happy about that. But at the same time, that would be the just cause, I would say. But as far as like the potentiality is concerned, I don't think you need to talk about the potential. I think you can argue what it is and still say that it's wrong to do so. Anyway, let's see.
So if an organism, through its normal course of development...
Oh, hey, David. That's okay. So David says, my daughter was producing antibodies that were killing her mother. We left it as long as we could before inducing. Abortion was never on the table. And the mother lived, correct? We left it. So your wife's still alive, right? I'm waiting for David to answer. I don't know if David's still here. But I find it interesting. Yeah, thanks for that comment, David.
Will possess this property, then don't wait. You can get a right to life in the next 10 seconds. Oh look, there you go. You're almost there. Keep rolling. You can stick the landing. And you're a winner. Congrats on being conceived, little fella. Here.
But yeah, I mean...
if you can learn to do a bedazzled...
Bro, if you don't get out my face, ad... I have important shit to do. Like argue with this stupid point here. So here we go. Now obviously, she's talking about the implantation of a fertilized egg cell on a woman's uterine wall. But I mean, oh yeah, she did survive. Okay, that's fantastic.
Here, you're a win. You can stick the landing. And you're a winner. Congrats on being conceived, little fella. Here's your right to life. Don't ask me why my accent changed. That's just how I imagine sport commentators to sound like. The potentiality principle is what allows anti-abortionists to say that so long as you are part of the Homo sapien species, from a zygote on, you have a right to life.
Well, yes, Homo sapiens are humans. I mean, you don't need to be like over scientific about it.
It also makes
which is funny coming from me.
He allows them to argue that a fetus developing limbs and fingers is morally relevant, not because physical traits themselves have moral relevance, but because they are a necessary causal step to developing future psychological traits that do matter. So let's search. Is there a property that gives an organism a right to life only because the property stands in a causal relationship to a second property? Tooley describes the
This seems like some unnecessary nonsense, I'm going to be honest with you. Let me see if I understand this question.
Like this.
Because this might be a great example of sophistry here. Let's see if I can understand what she's saying. Let's go back.
on, you have a right to life. It also maybe allows them to argue that a fetus developing limbs and fingers is morally relevant, not because physical traits themselves have moral relevance, but because they are a necessary causal step to developing future psychological traits that do matter. So,
But those psychological traits would exist independent of the limbs. The limbs aren't necessary. Yeah, the limbs don't matter. The point is you'd still be a human. In fact, even if you didn't develop those, even if you literally just had a head and an abdomen, you would be missing the hands and arms that would make you a functioning human being, but you'd still be a human. You'd still have the DNA. You still would have spawned from another human. You'd still have the consciousness that you would require. You'd still be human. You don't need the parts to be a human. You need the whole to be a human.
let's search.
So the main thing you'd need to be a human really is like a head and like an abdomen. Like these other parts around give you mobility, but like you could literally be a head and an abdomen, and then like just like have someone feed you your whole life. But you couldn't argue that that's not a human. It's not a functioning human, but you'd still be a human. I mean, unless you'd want to come up with a separate definition for what like a head and an abdomen would be. Because I just thought about how ridiculous it would be to be like a literal head and abdomen, but at the same time, that's all you would need to live, quote unquote, technically. If you were like a head and an abdomen and someone put you in a backpack and they just carried you around all day and then just fed you, and you'd be alive,
Is there a property that gives an organism a right to life only because the property stands in a causal relationship to a second property? Tooley described the relationship like this. Let's say there is action A that initiates the causal process C, which normally leads to the outcome E. B is an action involving minimal effort that stops the process C.
Hold on, wait. Legs are important for healthy blood cell generation. Really? I don't doubt that. I mean, I just didn't know. Why were our legs? Huh. That's interesting. That's really interesting. I wonder why that would be the case. You would probably know more than... Well, you obviously know more than me. That's really interesting.
Before outcome.
My sister doesn't have legs. I guess she isn't human. Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, like your sister not having legs doesn't change the fact that she's a human. She'd just be a human with a particular circumstance. But she's still, in principle, a human being. I mean, for one, she couldn't be anything else. Oh, the bone marrow. Okay. Oh. Yeah, but I mean, that's a good point. Because you wouldn't have a lot of bone marrow at all if you didn't have your arms and your legs. That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Outcome E occurs. If we assume that A and...
Okay, hold on. I paused too much. Let's go back. Let's give her a fair shake.
do matter. So let's search. Is there a property that gives an organism a right to life only because the property stands in a causal relationship to a second property? Tooley described the relationship like this. Let's say there is action A that initiates the causal process C, which normally leads to the outcome E. B is an action involving minimal effort that stops the process C before outcome E occurs. If we assume that A and B lead to no other consequences besides E, which I think is a fair assumption because being pregnant with a viable baby leads to birth, and abortion, the interference, stops birth, then there is moral symmetry between inaction and action. There is no moral difference between intentionally performing action B and intentionally refraining from performing action A, assuming identical motivation in both cases. Many philosophers
I don't know if I understand that. Maybe I'm stupid. Hold on. Okay.
In a causal relationship to a second property. Tooley described the relationship like this. Let's say there is action A that
action A
initiates the causal process C, which
okay.
which normally leads to the outcome E.
So this is interesting. So like, why would A lead to C but not to B? Why would there be an interruption in that chain? We also are missing D. So I guess maybe I'm being too specific, but it feels like we're skipping steps here, but okay.
B is an action involving minimal effort that stops the process C before outcome E.
So A would have to be pregnancy, C would have to be gestation, E would have to be birth.
Occurs
So B being the simple action that stops gestation.
if we assume that A and B lead to no other consequences besides E, which I think is a fair assumption, because being pregnant with a viable baby leads to birth
Okay.
and abortion.
But so okay, C is gestation, C has to be
The
abortion.
interference stops birth. Then there is moral symmetry between
So it'd be the same thing as getting an abortion as not getting one.
inaction and action.
I don't see how that makes sense. I don't understand how you would come to that conclusion
There
though.
is no moral difference between intentionally performing action B and intentionally refraining from performing action A.
So there's no moral difference between not getting pregnant and then stopping the pregnancy. Excuse me. That's dumb. That's real dumb. That doesn't even make sense. If the entire problem. Well, I mean, if the entire subject is position A is you're pregnant, then how is there no moral difference between stopping that pregnancy if that's the entire conversation? Like, this literally the entire conversation we're talking about. It doesn't make any sense.
Assuming identical motivation in both cases.
Assuming identical motivation in both cases. But wait a minute. So if the result... Okay. Wow. Man, this sounds like a bunch of nonsense.
Many philosophers disagree with this statement.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there definitely seems to be a difference between our positive duties, or our duty to act, and our negative duties, or our duty to stay out of the way.
I mean, not necessarily that, but the problem is the fact that like action and inaction aren't really kind of relevant to what we're actually like talking about. So like, okay, so let's see if I go back to this map here. So A to C to E. So A to C to E can be interrupted by B. So it's the same. So there's no moral difference between not doing an action and doing the action. But then the question is, what is the action? Because you're basically just saying that that there's no moral difference between doing something and not doing something. But who in their right mind would ever agree to that? For one, you would need context as to what the action is, as to decide whether you should do it or not do it. And like, for example, if the action is like, if someone's drowning and I can save them, not only do I have lifeguard training, but I have the license, I can swim. And I don't save them despite having the power. How is it the same thing as if I do save them when I have the power? Because that's essentially what you're saying. You're saying that there's no difference between not saving them and saving them. But that's just not true. Just as terms of just like just existing in reality, I'm either saving them or I'm leaving. But there's no difference. So I guess to that extent, there is no wrong and there is no right. I mean, it just is, I guess, huh? I don't know.
Even if it is not wrong,
That's weird.
negative duties, or our duty to stay out of the way. Even if it is not wrong to send food to starving people in other parts of the world, it is more wrong still to kill someone. And isn't the conclusion then that one's obligation to refrain from killing someone is a more serious obligation than one's obligation to save lives?
Hold on.
Is a more the conclusion in other way out of the way. Even if it is not wrong to send food to starving.
Even if it is not wrong to send food to starving people in other parts of the world. So even if it is wrong not to send food, okay.
People in other
It is more wrong
parts
still
of
to
the
kill
world.
someone.
It is more wrong still to kill someone. And isn't the conclusion then that one's obligation to refrain from killing someone is a more serious obligation than one's obligation to save lives?
I mean, sure, but I do still think that those two definitions are a bit, I say definitions, but two circumstances are a bit night and day. I mean, for one, the question is, what obligation do you have to other people on the other side of the planet? I mean, do you really even have the power to affect them? I mean, I think obligation still has to kind of come from power, because if you can't do something, how can you have an obligation to do it? Like, what obligation do you have to be a philanthropist if you don't have money? That doesn't make any sense. If you don't have the ability to do something, how can you have the obligation to do it? I don't think that makes sense. Like, so like, if I don't have the ability to send food to people on the other side of the planet, why would I have an obligation to send food to people on the other side of the planet? It's just something I legitimately can't do. And to that extent, that still wouldn't have anything to do with a woman's ability to kill her child, because a woman would have an obligation to save her child's life, because she can not kill her child. And it's not just not kill her child, but she still has to like eat food and like take care of it and like still be healthy and not smoke and drink and whatnot.
But Tooley says that there isn't any moral difference in the duties themselves. The reason why this distinction seems to exist is based on the motivations we assume people have. Generally, we assume that I might refrain from, say, donating to charities because I'm apathetic or lazy, or I just feel amoral about the situation.
I mean, but you could argue that because most of the time charities don't actually move on to solve problems. I mean, you could donate to a charity, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the money that you send is actually being used to accomplish anything. That could be one reason why you avoid it. Also, you could still argue that you still have no obligation to give your money to a charity. I mean, that charity is not actually like a functioning part of society that has any power to affect anything. Well, I guess it depends on the charity.
Whereas to actively choose to kill someone is knowingly and purposely intending to cause death. However,
But then that would all right. But I guess we argued that a fetus isn't a person, so I guess it doesn't matter, huh? I accept the risk. Leave me alone.
if we make the motivations identical, then the distinction between positive and negative duties falls. Consider scenario 1, where Jones sees that Smith will be killed by a bomb unless he warns him. Jones' reaction is, "How lucky! It will save me the trouble of killing Smith myself." So Jones allows Smith to be killed by the bomb, even though he could easily have warned him. Compare that to scenario 2.
That's because he wanted him to die, though. Well, okay.
Jones wants Smith dead, classic, and therefore shoots him. It doesn't feel...
It is time to ditch those old long shorts for these 2 for $24 deals.
Man, I can't skip the ad.
Oh,
okay.
are in. And these 2 for $24 VIP.
Okay, so I can't skip the ad because there's a McAfee little bubble that's not letting me. Maybe I just have to hold on. Oh, now it's gone. Okay, skip ad.
far worse than another. Jones feels like the cause of Smith's death in both cases, even if scenario 1 was due to his inaction. Moreover, we instinctively feel a difference between action and inaction because
dying, they're obligated to do something. I mean, not just, I mean, they do take the Hippocratic oath to do something. I mean, they choose to do no harm, and it is their obligation to help save lives as much as they can. But again, that's all predicated on their ability to do it. So like if someone doesn't have the skills required to save someone's life, then they don't have a moral obligation to do something. Which all kind of just gets summarized with great power comes great responsibility, I guess. I could have just said that. But I still don't really see what difference it makes when it comes to the topic of abortion. I do feel like we've gone like overboard. Okay, so here's the refutation. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do, man. Because we've been here for a minute now. We're gonna listen to oliSUNvia refute the potentiality principle, and then I'm gonna close out the stream and let you guys get back to the rest of your day. Ah! There you go. No, the computer is acting up right now. It's not. Okay, there we go.
A difference in moral duty. Rather, it's about weighing a person's own right to do what they want with their life against another person's right to life. With all this setup out of the way, here's Tooley's refutation against the potentiality principle. Suppose at some future time, a chemical were to be discovered which, when injected into the brain of a kitten, actually, I'm gonna replace kitten with a less likable animal, because some of y'all are way too obsessed with cats.
I mean, it could be a lobster. What damn difference does it make, oliSUNvia?
Suppose at some future time, a chemical were to be discovered.
Well, it's gonna be lobster. As if lobsters have less of a right to live than kittens.
Which,
well, I mean, they kind of do, because fuck lobsters, bro. They're delicious.
when injected into the brain of a crocodile.
Why a crocodile? Nah, bro. Like, what? Why crocodiles? Why can't it be a goat? Why can't it be a cheetah or a gazelle? You're wrong for that, oliSUNvia.
Would cause the
Why couldn't it have been like a python? No, I'm being a dickhead. All right, let's actually get to the point.
crocodile to develop into a crocodile possessing a brain of the sort possessed by humans, and consequently into a crocodile having all the psychological capabilities characteristic of adult humans.
Okay, so it's can the crocodile speak though? Because that would require some vocal cords.
Such crocodiles would be able to think, to use language, and so on.
Not really. But I mean, I guess I'm thinking too hard about what a crocodile is.
Crocodiles with this injection would now be self-conscious organisms, and thus they would have a serious right to life.
Well, to what extent do we know crocodiles aren't already self-conscious, though? I would have to argue that most living organisms that try to live have to be self-conscious to some extent. Perhaps they perhaps may not have the metacognitive abilities that we humans have, where we can like think about thinking. Like we as humans can proliferate upon being conscious and thinking critically. But like, can we say that a crocodile isn't conscious? I mean, or isn't self-conscious? I mean, to some extent it would have to be if it's trying to live, if it's trying to eat food, if it's trying to hide. I mean, in fact, now that I think about it, like the moment you say any animal can hunt, it has to be self-conscious of itself and its position and timing and patience. So it may not be able to express itself as much as humans are, but it would still have to have some kind of understanding of these concepts. Now, of course, we as humans have language, and thus we can define these concepts such as distance and timing and hiding and like camouflage. Like we all put words to the thought, but like a tiger would still understand distance and timing and hiding and camouflaging. So it still have to be self-conscious to understand its position relative to the animal it's hunting. Like basically what I'm saying is like I don't what difference does it make if it can think like humans?
It's like any other person. But this doesn't mean it's wrong to not inject the crocodile with the chemical and
I don't think it matters.
Kill it instead.
Well, what difference does it make? Like even if a tiger could talk, what difference would it make?
Just because it is possible to transform a crocodile into having a person-like brain doesn't mean it has a right to life before the transformation.
Okay, I think I get the point.
You can still think killing them is wrong, but it's not any more wrong than it is in status quo, where there is no potential for brain-altering chemicals. If you remember the moral symmetry principle we talked about earlier,
But I disagree with it, so I mean...
There is no moral difference between intentionally performing action B and intentionally refraining from performing action A, assuming identical motivation and...
So basically, okay, let's see if I can understand this, right? Now maybe I'm wrong here. But let's see if I can understand this. So there is no moral difference between trying to do an action and not doing the action, assuming that what motivates me is the same in both cases. Now, I don't even think that would be technically true for the most part, because I don't know if you can simultaneously can choose to not do something and to do something in the same situation. It would kind of be hard to come up with like an example of where you would be motivated. I guess you could say, if I'm trying to help someone, maybe even perhaps like psychologically, right? Let's say it's a depressed person. So there's no moral difference between me actually talking to them and helping them with their problems and me not saying anything to them and having them try to figure out their own problems for themselves. Because I guess you could say that my motivation is helping the person, just in a different way. I guess in scenario A, me giving them advice is a more active part for me to help them get the skills they need. Whereas not helping them or not talking to them is them gaining the skills for themselves to be able to do it for them. So instead of me, skipping the steps, they get to develop those skills by themselves. I guess you could say that. I mean, in that example I came up with randomly. But to that extent, let's say I were to apply this principle to a tiger, right? So there's no moral difference between not giving the tiger the human consciousness to communicate with us and giving the tiger the human consciousness if I have the same motivation in both cases. But I don't know why I would have the same motivation in both cases. Because I don't see a scenario where how I could feel the same about doing something and not doing something when it comes to this power. And to this extent, I would have to give that to an abortion, right? Because if my inaction to not stop the gestation of a fetus is because I want a child, then I cannot simultaneously say that I want to abort the fetus because I want a child. That doesn't make any sense. If these two actions are against each other in principle, how can I have the same motivation? I mean, specifically, so there is a situation where it's possible, I guess mostly psychologically, where I can have the motivation to want to help someone, where it's either I give them the skills, in summary at least, I'm trying to summarize my thoughts, where I'm giving them the skills or I'm having them develop those skills on their own. Because in that extent, that could happen. A person could become self-sufficient on their own, or I could give them the skills, or I could teach them the skills themselves, right? That would make sense. My motivation is to help them. But if my motivation is to have a child, then I can't abort it, because then I wouldn't have a child. They'd be dead. So I don't see how that. I don't think this works. I don't think this could work. I think the moment you start applying context to this, or the moment you recognize that the difference between inaction and action are diametrically opposed to each other, this doesn't make sense. The moment my action is a contradiction to my inaction, this can't be true. I think it would be impossible for that to be true.
In both cases, then according to this principle, if it isn't seriously wrong to refrain from initiating a causal process, in other words, if it isn't seriously wrong to not inject the crocodile, then it also isn't seriously wrong to interfere with that process.
Okay, but again, what would my motivation be to not do that?
For example, let's say you're an absolute klutz and you accidentally inject crocodile 405 with the brain-altering chemical. But oh shit. Crocodile 405 is supposed to be skinned and butchered in preparation for Gordon Ramsay, who's coming to pick up the crocodile in 15 bloody minutes. Not only will your boss fire you once they hear you've turned an ingredient into Master Croc, but you'll have a scowling Scottish man demolish any smidge of respect you have for yourself in every curse word possible.
Right, don't whistle at me, I'm not your fucking dog, yeah? You look more like a dog than I do. Fuck off, will you?
I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. There is a glimmer of hope, though.
I don't know. I don't think that works. Oh, hold on. If I understand this.
The brain transformation does.
But honestly, I could still just say tough shit to that crocodile. Game over, man. I mean, like, what difference would it make? Like, if let's say it's a crocodile that could talk and dance, and he says, "I don't want to die," I would reply, "I mean, tough, fam. Like, you know, that's life." I could honestly say to the crocodile, "Yo, when you hunted that duck the other day, do you think the duck wanted to die?" And the crocodile would be like, "No, but I had to eat." And then I could just respond, "Well, Gordon has to eat." tough, Mr. Crocodile. Like, I don't know. I could just argue. I mean, you know, tough shit. You know, the crocodile lost the game of life. But to that extent, like, I think there's a huge difference between needing sustenance to continue to live and killing an organism that has done nothing wrong. Like, I think, like, if I were to go poaching, well, even poaching is still me, like, trying to get something from the dead carcass of the animal, right? But let's say I legitimately killed for sport. Let's say I legitimately went out to go find a wild pig, and I bashed his head in, and I just left it for dead, right? Now, I guess you could argue that that's kind of morally wrong, because you didn't need to eat it. You just went out to cause suffering to some organism somewhere. You just wanted to hurt something, and to cause pain unjustly, to cause pain for no reason but for your sadism could be wrong. Now, you could make that argument, I think. I think that would be a fair argument to make. But if I killed the pig to eat the pig, then the cause is I need to live. This is the natural cost of existence as a living organism. With the exception, well, no, you can have a Venus flytrap. I was going to say with the exception of plants, but that's not technically true, because you have some plants that do literally eat other organisms. So with the exception of flytraps, which there's a specific word for it, I just don't remember it. But with the exception of, like, plants and flytraps, like, we have to, or any organism really, for the most part, has to consume other organisms. That's just reality. That's just how it is. I didn't make it this way. It just be this way. So to this extent of existing as a being on planet Earth, we have to kill other organisms and consume them. Game, set, match. Killing a fetus is not consuming an organism to live. It's not doing that. And thus the context is different. In fact, for the most part, you're killing the fetus to avoid the responsibility of it. That's just the facts. Now, if you want to argue that it is okay to kill a fetus to avoid responsibility, that's our conversation. But to argue that it is not a human being, for one, to argue it's not living, for two, to argue that it's not a person, for three, I think is really stupid. I'm going to be honest with you. I do think that this is dumb. And I do think that this is a lot of obfuscating of, like, the grander principle and points here.
Doesn't happen until 2 hours later. Before the 2-hour mark, the crocodile possesses 0 person-like capabilities and characteristics.
It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And I know it sucks to say this, you know, to our whole argument, but, like, again, I could literally do this for every single animal in the animal kingdom. I can do it for scallops. I could do it for a sponge. I could do it for a tree. I could do it for a goat. I could do it for a cow. I could do it for chickens and rats. And I could do it to every crocodile that's in that tanker. I guess a tank. I don't know. It would be in every crocodile in that cage. I could do it to every fish in that cage. Every animal now can think consciously. Every animal can now talk and speak. Is it wrong now to consume those animals because they can think critically, because they can speak, because they can talk? I would argue no. Because at the end of the day, in order for one of them to live, they have to kill each other. That's facts. That's facts. The crocodile would still have to eat ducks and still have to eat... What else do crocodiles eat? I don't know. They eat geese. They eat other smaller fish in ponds. Some of them can eat some other smaller mammals. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they'd still have to consume the flesh of other animals. Consciousness or not, it doesn't change reality.
So should every carnivore? I mean, because you would then have to argue that which you could make the argument. You could argue that yes, it is morally wrong now because every prey animal is conscious. Carnivores must sacrifice their lives. They must die. Game, set, match, carnivores. You don't get to live because in order to live, you have to kill other organisms. So you just have to die. See you later. Goodbye. You could argue that. Now, I think that'd be a little stupid. And the reason why that'd be a little stupid is because if you let every prey animal live, they would consume way too much of the plants in the environment. And if there are no plants in the environment, there's no air. And we die. Well, they would die. The prey animals would eventually starve to death because they would eat all of the vegetation. So what actually happens is, well, I'm explaining a lot of nature. The point is, if we're going to argue philosophically in principle point of reality, there are certain things that suck, or there's just certain things that are facts of existence. And the fact of existence is that females, human females specifically, have to gestate fetuses. That's just how it is. So the real question is it okay for them to kill that fetus? And I would say no. Why? Because as a human being, you don't have a right to kill another human being without just cause. So you'd have to argue that. For me, you'd have to argue that principle. All of this is a bunch of globbly-gloop. This is all a bunch of nonsense. I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm sorry I brought you guys here to listen to this nonsense, but I'm going to be honest with you. This does sound like nonsense to me. I genuinely don't care if a crocodile can speak. I'm going to be honest with you. The crocodile could be, he could literally be Killer Croc from Batman, right? Like he can literally, he stands upright, he becomes bipedal, you know? And I would still just have to run the fade on him like I'm Bruce Wayne. Sorry, crocodile. I'm about to make some soup. Too bad, so sad. He could complain all he wants while he's getting killed. It's just, tough. Because in reality, that crocodile, you think he's going to cry about the fact that this duck is sad? Oh no, I had to kill a duck. He's not going to cry about a duck. So fuck him. Fuck this crocodile.
Is certainly not self-conscious. You can kill the crocodile right now and would be like killing any other crocodile before an injection. As long as it hasn't developed the properties that grant a right to life, there can be nothing wrong with interfering with the causal process. But
I don't know. I would still argue that a crocodile is self-conscious, honestly. And I would still argue that a crocodile has a desire to live to such an extent that a crocodile would have a right to life then. Based on our premises. I mean, I don't know how you could argue that a crocodile isn't self-conscious if it understands it has a presence that it needs it to conceal. I mean, would you say, I guess it wouldn't be a person, but I guess a person's a human. No, a person is something that's self-conscious. But a crocodile can be self-conscious. Ay.
But if you believe that potential is sufficient to grant a right to life now, then you must accept that you cannot butcher this completely normal crocodile. You must face the consequences of losing your job and being haunted by Gordon Ramsay's words forever.
Dog, yeah, you look more like a dog than I do.
If you want to be healthier, then you gotta get Kachava.
I started Kachava a month ago.
Kachaba's not bad, guys. I thought about doing a review for Kachaba. Please be reasonable. Are you suggesting me to be vegan? Not at all. No, fuck that crocodile. Honestly, look, I've argued with vegans before, and I made my case rather simple. Animals have no moral obligation to each other. Thus, we as humans have no moral obligation to them. Animals can't recognize morality at no point in time. They will never come to a point where they can. Too bad, so sad. The natural existence of life is one organism must consume another to live. That's just facts. You can't deny that. It's just the way it is. Sorry. No one made it that way. That's just how it is. So to that extent, where we have to consume other organisms to live, and to that extent, animals can't even recognize morality. To argue that it's morally wrong to eat them is goofy to me. So no, you do not have to be vegan. Again, let me ask. I mean, let's say a bobcat, strolled up on your front porch, would you sit down and have a conversation with it? No, you wouldn't. It has no capacity to do so. So.
Fuck off, will you?
Quote, but if it is not seriously wrong to destroy an injected crocodile, which will naturally develop the properties that bestow a right to life,
But if it is not seriously wrong to destroy an infected crocodile,
neither can it be seriously wrong to destroy a member of Homo sapiens, which lacks such properties,
But again, okay, the problem is I'd have to accept these premises to be true, and I don't.
will naturally come to have them. 40 years later, Ugolini and Minerva, whom I'll refer to as G&M from now on, advance similar arguments to Tooley, but they add a bit more medical context. They say that most, if not all, pro-choicers think that it's valid to get an abortion if a fetus is found to have severe abnormalities. That would not only
I don't agree with that.
make the baby's life extremely difficult, but also the family's, especially if
A difficult life does not mean you have the power to end it. I don't think, again, we're arguing about particular circumstances, not about the principle. So you say, is it okay? But again, it that would be a separate conversation, which I think would be fine to have. If a human's life will be medically difficult, should you abort them to save them from that pain? And the truth of the matter is, I mean, there's no way to know what the quality of their life would be. They could be a really happy person, or they could be a really depressed person. I don't know. I mean, there are people who are perfectly able-bodied and depressed. I mean, should we kill them? I don't know. So I mean, to what value do we have? To what extent do we as people have the power to decide that you don't get to live because your life will be difficult, or you shouldn't live because your life will be difficult, or you shouldn't live because you'll make the lives of other people, your parents and such, difficult? That's the question. And I don't know if humans have that power. I don't know if you have a right to decide that your children don't get to live because they'll have a medical condition. I mean, what if the person is going to be autistic? Does it have to be a genetic abnormality, or can it be like a learning disability? Do we stop there? No, I think most people would say no. I mean, if they have ADHD, they get to live. I'm sure most people would say if they have autism, they get to live. I would say the problem is if they're mentally handicapped, they do not get to live. Well, I mean, well, is it they don't get to live, or are you saying you have the choice to make sure they don't get to live? Because I don't know if you should have that power. The problem, one of the biggest problems I have is granting humans the power of life and death to decide that a person doesn't get to live based on arbitrary conditions. I mean, for numerous reasons, right? I'm a black person, right? You know, do I need to defend that further? No, I'm kidding. Well, I'm half kidding at least. But again, if we're talking about the principle, even based on my principle, that'd still be wrong morally. You know, even if the baby's going to be mentally challenged, you don't have a right to kill it. It's still a human. It may not have the correct mental faculties, but it's still a human. You don't get to kill it because it didn't turn out the way you wanted to. I would argue.
they are financially struggling or are a single parent. But what do we do?
Well, no, I mean, you definitely don't get to kill your child because you're single. Oh, no, no, absolutely not. That's a whole different conversation.
Exact.
Hold on. No.
Difficult, but also the families, especially if they are financially struggling or are a single parent.
Tough. You don't get to kill children because you're poor. You don't. Let's defend such conclusion, right? Say you're financially struggling. Does that mean that you will always financially struggle? Now, statistically, that might be the case. It may be the case that you will never be able to become self-sufficient if you have a child. Does that mean that you have the right to kill it? I don't see the logical conclusion there. I don't see how you can jump logically to, I'm getting an abortion because I don't have the financial means. Because one, you could argue, why are you having sex if you can't afford having children? That would be my first question. But number two, there are people that can. So why don't you give it to the people that can in an adoption? I mean, but regardless, I still don't think that I mean that's still not a counter argument to the principle, though. The principle that I have is a fetus is a human being, and killing human. I mean, so the question is poverty a just reason to kill a fetus? No. Why? Because you can change poverty. It might be difficult, but it is possible to change. So a poverty state, you don't have to stay poor. And I've seen plenty of single mothers on TikTok who had children at 16 and are now own their own businesses, right? Like it's plenty of rags to riches stories. It might be difficult, it might be tough. It may never even happen. And regardless of it never happening, I still don't see how being poor is just cause to being able to get an abortion. So you'd have to argue that being poor is just cause to kill your child. I'm sorry, to kill your fetus. I don't know. That's what I would need to see.
But
what do we do?
What do we do when the exact same conditions that would have justified abortion are only discovered after birth?
Would you also be against the death penalty? Yeah. I actually don't really like the death penalty, I'll be honest with you. I think mostly if you're going to kill another human being, it's got to be like in self-defense. Mostly because like if you catch a person and you try them, then killing them doesn't really do anything against whatever crime they committed. So if someone were to go murder, I would say like 4 people in cold blood, cut their heads off, put them on a pike, and then you capture them, and then you incarcerate them. Say you kill them, I mean 4 people are still dead. I don't really think. I mean, I don't think you really accomplished much of anything there. If you can remove him from the general population, absolutely, but killing him, it wouldn't solve anything. Versus if the same guy is about to kill the 5th person, and then you fight him and you can't stop him. You know he's crazy. The only thing you do is kill him. All right, you gotta kill him. Yeah, I would say in self-defense. I'd say if you kill someone in self-defense or in protection of another person, I would say that's absolutely just cause. It's just reason. I don't think it's a happy thing. I don't think it's something you should look for. Like, well, oh yeah, I get to kill people to protect them. Like, don't be a vigilante. But like, if again, like in any like again, if someone walks into a store, they pull out a gun, right? And you can quick draw, or they're distracted, and you pull out your gun to save other people. I would say yeah. But if the person's been captured, they're not a present danger anymore. I mean, I guess you could kill them, but I don't really like it, I think you could kill them, but like, I mean, I don't think anything would be accomplished at that point.
Or during delivery. One example is the case of Treacher-Collins syndrome, or TCS, a condition that affects 1 in every 10,000 births, causing facial deformity and related
How long have you been going? 2 hours
physiological failures. In particular, potentially life-threatening related physiological. 1 in every 10 Treacher-Collins syndrome after birth or during delivery. One example is the case of Treacher-Collins syndrome, or TCS, a condition that affects 1 in every 10,000 births, causing facial deformity and related physiological failures. In particular, potentially life-threatening respiratory problems. Many parents choose to get an abortion if, through genetic prenatal testing, their fetus is found to be affected by TCS. However, tests are usually taken only if there is family history of TCS, but they can affect babies with perfectly healthy family histories. These tests are also very expensive. The parents who are less likely to pay for these tests are the same parents who have less access to parenting resources. It can already be difficult for these parents to raise a healthy baby, much less a baby with TCS. And look, I get that pro-life and especially
I mean, I'm tough. I'm sorry. I don't. I still don't see why the conclusion is you kill them. Like, their life will be difficult. I am a perfectly healthy. Not perfectly healthy. I don't have, as far as I know, any genetic abnormalities other than I'm ugly. No, I'm kidding. But no, but seriously, like I don't have any genetic abnormalities and my life sucks. I mean, like, should I have been killed because my life is going to suck? I don't know, because now I have the opportunity to not make my life suck versus I'd have no opportunity if I was killed. I don't know. We'll see.
Religious pro-life folk believe in the motto, all life is precious, regardless of what state the baby is born in. But maybe pregnant parents wouldn't feel the need to get an abortion if society was better equipped to include disabled and handicapped persons.
I mean, maybe, but I don't know. Again, I don't think that addresses the principle of what these people are saying.
The truth
like, here's the thing.
was better
Let's go back.
Equipped
like, let me
to
see.
Parents wouldn't feel the need of what.
I honestly feel like I feel like this is more being emotional and trying to create tough situations rather than actually dealing with the premises of an argument.
State the baby is born in. But maybe pregnant parents wouldn't feel the need to get an abortion if society was better equipped.
I also, that's me taking too many red pills, never mind.
To include disabled and handicapped persons. The truth is, society sucks at providing accessibility measures and prohibiting parents from getting an abortion when they know their child and family will struggle is exploitative of those parents.
Hold on, fam. I don't think I can concur with that conclusion. Because for one, those parents are the ones who decided to have sex. No one forced them to. Let's assume, right? Let's assume male, female. Let's say they get married. They did their genetic testing. They know that there's a chance that their child would have these genetic abnormalities. Maybe they don't. So let's assume they didn't know. Who told them to have sex? If they weren't self-sufficient enough to raise children, and they know that having sex can result in having children, to what obligation does society have to make having children easier for them? Now, I could see this point here, and I don't even disagree with it, that we should probably have a society where we work well to make, like, having families easier. I don't even disagree. But what does that have to do, at least to me, because that's what I'm trying to grasp, what does that have to do with two parents who have a genetically disformed child? Like, to what obligation does society have to make it more comfortable, easier for them? I don't know. I think there's a case. I think you could argue for a case where, again, society should probably work to help having families be easier. I don't think I would even disagree with that. But I don't see how you could say that it's exploitative of these parents if they made the choice to have sex. That was their choice. Like, how is society exploiting these people by having them raise a child that they brought into this world? They did that. Society didn't do it. They did. I think my problem is the fact that like you're trying to take the decision of two people and expand it to the responsibility of an entire society, and I don't think that makes sense. I don't think that's reasonable. I'm going to be honest with you.
Secondly, GNMs say that there are already cases where killing a child due to unbearable suffering is allowed. The Netherlands
What the fuck says? I'm sorry.
Has what's called the Groningen Protocol, which permits life termination of children facing endless suffering and
Yeah, the baby is not society's problem, is what Myth Cuttlefish says. And I mean, the baby could be. I don't think it's society's responsibility. I think it's different. I mean, the baby could be. That baby could grow up to be, damn near Doctor Doom. You know what I'm saying? That baby could be a menace. He could grow up to be the most villainous person in the world. It's still not society's responsibility to raise him. It's his parents' job. His parents are the ones that got together to for his existence. One out of 10,000 is kids per year with these afflictions. So thus, we need to have an unlimited killing of babies because of the corner. I'm reading some of these comments here.
and most likely incurable conditions. Lastly, G&M decide to use the term after-birth abortion.
Nigga, what? After I should make this the thumbnail. After birth abortion, dude. All right, fam. Casey Anthony just did an after birth abortion. That's what that was. All these mothers that drown their children in the bathtub. That was just an after birth abortion. My bad. My bad, guys. You know. Our bad.
Instead of infanticide, in order to emphasize.
But to me, that's just a euphemism. I honestly, I mean, for the most part, abortion probably in general is also just a bit of a euphemism for infanticide. I'll be honest with you.
That the moral status of the individual killed is comparable to that of a fetus rather than a child. Quote, therefore, we claim that killing a newborn could be ethically permissible in all the circumstances where abortion would be.
Jesus, that is... Ooh, that's rough. After birth abortions is some ancient Sparta shit. Yeah, dude. We're going back to the Spartans, bro. Man, that baby came out looking a little weird. Well, alright. Nice try, baby. Thought you could have a tenure in life? Gonna make shit harder for me, nigga. You gotta die. It's that simple. Sorry.
As to why newborns and fetuses have the same moral status, their arguments are very similar to Tooley's, so I won't go much into that. But feel free to read their paper.
But that being said, though, I mean, so to this extent, I mean, viewer who has stuck with me up to this point, as it turns out, I have technically interpreted all their arguments correctly, because they came to the same conclusion that I actually would have said, that there actually isn't any difference between a fetus and a newborn child. Yes, G&M said so themselves. So it looks like I've been correct so far in understanding their positions. Hopefully I've done a pretty good job of countering them and saying that this is nonsensical. This is just dumb.
Paper if you are interested. Okay, so when did Tooley and G&M's arguments actually become relevant to real life? I think a good answer to that is born alive babies. These are babies that are unintentionally born alive during a failed attempted abortion. And the question is, what are physicians supposed to do in these circumstances?
Kill them. And that's the correct answer. The correct answer is kill them. Like, the woman literally went in there for you to kill her fetus. That's why she's there. So it doesn't matter if it's born alive. You kill it. It's that simple. That's the correct answer. Now, here's what's interesting, right? If anyone's bothered by the correct answer, maybe, now just maybe, there's a problem with the whole thing. Maybe. Let's go back. Let's go back.
And the question is that are unintentionally born. The answer to that is born alive babies. These are babies that are unintentionally born alive during a failed attempted abortion. And the question is, what are physicians supposed to do in these circumstances? Now,
kill them. Physicians are supposed to kill them. They're born alive. The mother came in there knowing that the baby was going to be terminated. You kill them, and you leave it at that. If you think that that's cruel, then perhaps the entire scenario itself is cruel. What difference is made other than the fact that it is no longer inside of the mother?
Now, philosophers like Tooley and G&M have an easy response. Kill the damn thing.
Yeah. So it looks like I understand this pretty well. I'm not saying this to stroke my own ego, but I am mostly saying it because there have been times I've been kind of confused. But it looks like I am understanding these positions well, because she keeps coming to the same conclusions that I'm coming to. So I don't know. Or maybe we're both stupid. That might be it.
fresh out of the womb, it has no self-consciousness and no aims, so it doesn't have a right to life.
That would be, yes, that would be true if we accept his premises are correct.
It's okay. They say these things in theory, but in political practice, it would never be defended.
We're talking about infanticide. But two Republican presidential candidates are accusing President Obama of voting in favor of making the killing of newborn children legal.
In 1985, a Texas physician was sentenced to 15 years in prison for delivering an infant girl by hysterectomy, which is when you remove all or part of the uterus, and then proceeded to drown that infant in a bucket of water. In 2000, Jill Stanek, a nurse, testified that born-alive babies at her hospital were being left to die alone in a utility closet.
It had to be a utility closet?
Bird babies were being aborted alive and shelved to die in the hospital's soiled utility room.
And in 2006, Gloria Williams was having an abortion when the fetus was unexpectedly born moving and gasping for air. An owner of the abortion clinic came in, cut the fetus's umbilical cord, placed it in a biohazard bag, and plopped it in the trash. Cases like these prompted the creation of the Born Alive Infant Protection Act in the United States, which extended legal protection to babies born after failed abortion attempts. Now, if you know anything about US politics, they don't tend to agree on stuff. But for this bill, it passed both houses of Congress without a single dissenting vote. It was a 98-0 vote in the Senate, and that's what we expect. I mean, it doesn't look so good for a politician to say that they are willing to kill a born-alive baby, right? Well, in Illinois, it was not as smooth of a process. Obama, amongst others, were
Yeah, to be fair, that would be a tough sell. That'd be a really tough sell, honestly.
worried that the Illinois Born Alive Infants Protection Act would unjustly limit the right to abortion. What if parents now feel burdened to keep the child despite having really wanted or needed an abortion? Could this deter pregnant parents from seeking abortions in the second or third trimester?
So?
Even if they've been victims of rape or have zero financial capability to raise this child?
I kind of think that being poor and being raped are kind of night and day. I'll be honest with you. I would still argue, still based on my arguments, you could still say even in the case of rape, you'd still have to deliver that child. I don't know if you'd be obligated to raise it. That might be a question. But I find it really interesting that I've seen this a lot. Look, man, I've seen this a lot. I've seen a lot of women who have been raped still give birth to their babies and raise them. To me, what's interesting is, for the most part, I see more rape victims raising their children than I have ever heard rape victims talk about aborting their children. Now, here's the thing. Now, that's just my perception, okay? That's just what I've seen. And I could be 100% wrong. I will accept that I could be wrong. That there are millions more of women just being raped and they're just getting abortions. And the only stories we hear are the ones who are raped and gave birth to their children. Who knows? But from what I've seen, again, I could be wrong. I'm prefacing this, that I could be wrong. For the most part, I see a lot of rape victims still raise their children. So, to me, I find it really interesting, honestly, that for the most part, most of the rape victims I've seen still choose to have their children. I don't know why this is one of the strongest arguments for allowing abortions, when I see the opposite. More. And I say more. I actually, now that I think about it, I'm sure at some point I would have met a woman, if not met, seen on the internet at least, of a woman who had been raped who got an abortion. I'm sure. I mean, maybe she just wouldn't tell me, but maybe I encountered her. I'm sure they exist. But the main people I see, who are honestly sometimes even, I wouldn't say main, but I've seen consistently a lot of people who are anti-abortion Or said rape baby. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say rape baby. Maybe I shouldn't call them that. But said person who is a result of rape is like, hey man, maybe I shouldn't. I like being alive. And while it's true, my father is absolute garbage. I get to be here now on this stage talking to you people, or I get to be here now living life. I get to be in life now because my mom said that my life was more valuable than the crime that was committed. That's what I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of people who are anti-abortion are actually like children conceived of rape. I've seen that a lot. And I very seldom actually see women who have been raped who got abortions be pro-choice. I don't see that very often. In fact, it's really interesting because most of the time I see a lot of the women who are pro-choice either A, have never had any children at all, or B, I guess technically you could either have not had children or have lots of children. But usually it would be like, I've seen like a couple of like married women, or like a lot of liberal married women will still be like pro-choice. And there's a lot of like liberal college students that are pro-choice. But the thing that's interesting to me is very seldom are they like rape victims, I've noticed. Or at least they don't admit it. So again, I could be wrong, but from what I've seen, now the reason why I spend so much time talking about this is because I wanted to kind of challenge like that argument. The argument that an abortion should be fine in cases of rape. Because again, we can meet people who are a result of rape. That's possible, like they exist. Could you look them dead in the face and say, you should not be alive because your father raped your mother? Which you'd have to argue. I mean, you'd have to tell them that, yeah, you should have been killed. You don't get to live because your father is awful. That's what you'd have to tell those people. And you can make that argument. I think it'd be an easy argument to disprove, but that would have to be your position. Because again, as emotionally tumultuous as it would be, as difficult as it would be, I would still say that if you're a woman even raped, you still have an obligation to allow your child to live. Your child is still you. I mean, it's difficult, but there's lots of shit that's difficult in life. I think the thing for me is, and I haven't actually had the worst life, right? But I haven't had like the worst life. But that being said, I mean, like life is just tough. There's lots of things that I do that I don't necessarily want to do, but I do it because it's the right thing. Because I just have that perseverance. I think that there's just some things in life you just have to do, and I would say that allowing your child to live is one of them. I'd argue that because there's difficulties in life and you have to have will to get through it, that's just one of those things. The solution should not be because I saw victims of rape raise their children, abortion should be banned. Well, no, the solution should be because they are a living organism, a human, no less, and killing a human is wrong, abortion should be banned. There you go. Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think you might have missed it, my friend, but I mean, I've argued in principle from the top of the hour. A fetus is a human being. Killing a human being without unjust cause is wrong. I don't think the sins of your father is a just cause to kill a fetus. What your father did is not what you did, or what your father did is not what the fetus did. How do you punish the fetus because his father's a rapist? That doesn't make sense. You would punish the rapist, not the child. And thus, as such, we could logically argue that you still have an obligation, or at the very least, it should be morally wrong to kill that fetus. You would have to counter argue that one, even in the result of rape, that fetus is not a human, or you would have to argue that it's just cause to kill that fetus because its father is a rapist. And could you argue? I don't even know if you're still here. I mean, you may have left. Hopefully, you didn't leave because I would like to see your comment. Could you argue that it is just cause to kill a fetus because its father is a rapist? I'm waiting to see if he responds. He may not even be here. All right, we'll continue, I guess. He's not saying anything. Or he's typing.
Will this also deter more physicians from performing labor-induced abortions?
And that essentially adding an additional doctor who then has to be called in an emergency situation to come in and make these assessments is really designed simply to burden.
Says, no, you're right. I am late to the stream. Oh, okay. Okay. Not to pick on you, but would you have a counter argument? Because I am interested. I would like to hear it. I'm not saying this to be an asshole. I will, if you legitimately could counter argue me, I would like to hear it, and we'll see what you say.
The original decision of the woman and the physician to induce labor and perform an abortion.
I think that these are valid concerns if you claim to support abortion for all 3 trimesters of pregnancy. These are cases that we don't like to face, but if you are pro-choice, then I think this is a really important problem to navigate.
Well, I would say, I mean, the whole thing in principle is. I guess principle is the word of the day, huh?
Heartless as he may sound, I think Obama's stance on born-alive babies unveils a problem for common pro-choice positions. The exact problem Tooley and G&M point out. If a fetus is born an hour later, it seems to have the exact same level of moral personhood outside the womb as it did when it was inside.
Yes.
Both of them have the same
So what you'd have to argue is that it doesn't.
Physiological traits and mental capacities. Neither recognizes itself as a continuing moral agent with aims.
But again, I think one of the biggest problems I have here is if we accept these premises as true, then I can apply this to just pregnant women. And I could just kill a pregnant woman's fetus regardless of if she wants it or not. If this is true, it doesn't matter if the woman wants the fetus or not. I could legitimately just stab her, just stab her in the womb, just stab her and say, oh, well, too bad. So, I mean, that would be assault, right? Like, I would get in trouble for assault. You can't just stab people. But you couldn't legally say I committed, like, infanticide at that point. If we want to accept that this is the truth, then that means it doesn't matter if the person wants the fetus or not, it has no right to live. And what we have granted them is but mercy. We have no obligation to our children, but we have granted them mercy and allowed them to live. I've actually seen a couple of TikToks where there are some young ladies that say that, which is interesting. But that would be the only conclusion we could make, honestly.
It seems then that Obama took the widest stance possible to avoid this inconsistency in his pro-choice agenda. But are Tooley, G&M, and Obama correct? Does birth really have no moral significance?
All of us, every single person ever, is a child of God.
He is our Father in heaven, and he...
I support this message, but I gotta skip it. Actually, if they're Mormons... I'll talk about Mormons some other time.
I spent a lot of time explaining the content in Tooley and G&M's papers because I wanted to present a thorough, charitable version of their arguments. Now that we hopefully have a good grasp of what they were saying, we can now get into their flaws. The main reason why Tooley and G&M proclaim infanticide of newborns is okay is because they see no moral significance in the change of location. Viable fetus versus newborn baby is just a semantic change, but they are both morally equivalent beings. But is birth really just a change in location? The way I might move from one part of the room to another? In Reenie's...
Well, physically, yes. Yes. Like, if we're gonna be super ultra liberal about, literal about this, if we're gonna be just totally frank, yes, literally. Like, the difference between, like, if a woman is on, there's a word for it. I forget the word. If she's on the bed, right, and she's pushing it out, right, and the wet nurse grabs the baby and cuts the umbilical cord, the difference is all but 3 feet. That's the difference. Like it was inside of her, and 3 feet later it's outside of her. That's it. That's literally what happened when she gave birth. So I mean, what? So to that extent, yeah. What difference does it make if the fetus is born or not, or if the baby's born or not? It was a living organism when it was inside of her, and it's alive when it's outside of her. That's literally just a change in location. You couldn't argue otherwise. That's literally what just happened. So again, to me, I would say I would say that its location is irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether it's been born or it's unborn. Like this is all semantic nonsense. Like whether it's been born or not, like technically speaking, if a woman gets a cesarean section, then the child wasn't born. It was literally ripped out of her. Like that's literally what happened. That's not me over exaggerating. They literally cut her, and they cut her womb, pulled her child out, and then they stitched her up. So technically the child wasn't born. It was ripped out of them. But see how stupid? No one would argue the semantics of that because it's stupid and irrelevant.
This paper, Of Course the Baby Should Live, Rini agrees that a person is someone with a right to life. To have a right to life, they must be self-conscious of their existence and ascribe value to it in such a way that they consciously desire its continuation. Very similar definition to Tooley and GNM. But she takes a crucial step that they don't. She describes 2 logically distinct ways to attribute value to one's existence. In one way, an individual can value their existence directly. This is basically Tooley's self-consciousness requirement, where an individual is aware of themselves as the subject of their life, and they directly value the continuation of their own experiential states. Quote, in this case, the individual attributes value to her existence itself, regardless of anything else. The other way an individual can value their existence is indirectly. An individual values something that requires their continued existence to achieve that thing. For example, I'm a baby, goo goo gaga, I want mommy, I want milk, and I need to continue to exist for me to slurp that mommy milk. Notice that this does not require the individual to have any attitude toward her existence itself, or even to be able to conceptualize her existence. I can want mommy's milk without being aware of my own self-existence. We are left then with 2 definitions of a moral person. 1, a moral person is an individual capable of conceiving of herself as the subject of a life that she values. 2, a moral person is an individual capable of valuing certain aims, for which the continuation of her life is instrumentally necessary.
Yeah, but you'd be assuming that the baby puts any value on it apart from its literal physiological reaction. Like at that point, the baby isn't valuing anything. It's not conscious of what her value is. It's just responding to its hunger. So at that point, it's just a bundle of nerves just reacting to stimuli.
Okay, so which definition were Tooley and GNM using?
Oh yes, the argument you need to counter is that a fetus should be killed because its father is a rapist. Basic summary.
Well, number 1 is too strong to be plausible. It would require the individual to conceive of themselves as the subject of their life, and also understand what it would mean to value that life. This would not only exclude newborn babies, but also some developmentally disabled adult humans. In fact, GNM say that many non-human animals and mentally disabled human individuals are persons. So, I guess they adopted the weaker definition, number 2. This definition does not exclude developmentally disabled adults, nor certain non-human animals. Although they may not be able to have sophisticated self-conceptions, they do have aims. But Rini is confused as to why infants are excluded from this. Do babies not have aims? GNM merely assert that hardly can a newborn be said to have aims. It does not seem to me that they provide a convincing argument for this assertion. True, a newborn infant does not have very sophisticated aims, nor a particularly sophisticated conception of its future. But even a newborn infant does exhibit preferences for warmth, for food, for physical contact. It experiences.
Yeah, but that's just nerves reacting to stimuli, though. I mean, what difference does it make?
Experiences pleasure.
It's not conscious. It's just reacting.
And pain as linked to the satisfaction or frustration of these preferences, and it will do the tiny things within its power, grasping, suckling, crying, to bring about the fulfillment of these preferences.
Yeah, but I mean, all of this is just projection onto something. It technically isn't preferring it. Well, I guess its bundle of nerves can prefer to be warm and can prefer to be satisfied or have its hunger satisfied, but they aren't self-conscious aims that are working towards something. I could still argue, even if it's in favor of the fact that you don't kill a newborn child, that it's irrelevant.
It seems plausible to me to call all of these things aims in a newborn infant.
I guess. I mean, as much as any living, I guess. It's reacting to the need to live.
At least, I can't see any justification for refusing to call these things aims.
I guess my biggest problem is the fact that, like, why would we need to imply that it has aims? Like, why is this the counter argument?
And yet insisting that many non-human animals do have aims. And the reason why born babies have aims and fetuses do not is because the change in location during birth is morally relevant. When a fetus is inside the womb, it is entirely dependent on the pregnant parent. All its needs are provided directly through its umbilical cord and uterus environment. It is completely passive in regards to its own needs. But when that fetus comes out into the world, its umbilical cord is snapped, its lovely uterus home is gone, and it must now breathe on its own, process its own nutrients, generate its own bodily warmth. A newborn becomes biologically independent. It now needs to actively seek out the fulfillment of its own needs. And they immediately do whatever their little squishy bodies can to signal that they want to fulfill these needs by crying and suckling and yelling. Ugh. You're telling me that I have to signal for food myself now? I can't just wait for someone else to eat? God, being born sucks. Being born also situates you in a social context that didn't exist beforehand. In abortion, infanticide, and moral context, Lindsay Porter argues that infanticide and abortion are alike in theory. In reality, though, they will never be the same because they occur in different moral contexts. She says that just because something has a right to life doesn't mean you automatically have the thumbs up to go for the kill.
Because why? But that's totally arbitrary. What I don't see what difference it would make.
Doesn't mean you
Hold
context. She says that just because something has a right to life,
just because something doesn't have a right to life,
you automatically have the thumbs up to go for the kill.
But why? Hopefully her response is why, because I don't see why you wouldn't be able to have a thumbs up to kill it.
Take tree lobsters.
I mean, as sadistic as it might be, I mean, like, what obligation do you have to not do that?
For example, they have the same intrinsic right to life as any other little insect that we squash with zero remorse, aka no right to life. And yet, it is morally impermissible to kill tree lobsters, not because they have a right to life, but because they are an endangered species.
Yeah, but that's just something we as humans put on. That's illegal. But that, first of all, like, an endangered species is a legal classification. But that has nothing to do with whether or not we should be able to kill that organism or not. Like, that's just something we as humans slapped onto it. Because the truth of the matter is, species kind of die out like every single day, right? Like, that's just, extinction is just a natural consequence of existence, unfortunately, for better or for worse. Now, I guess you could say that to the extent that humans have, like, endangered the animal by, like, destroying its environment, I guess you could say we then have some obligation to it. I would still argue we really don't. I mean, I think it'd be sad if an animal were to go, but I mean, again, like, we don't really have an obligation to protect animals. They don't have any obligation to protect us. So, like protecting that thing, like giving it that protective class, I don't even really think is comparable to protecting a human fetus.
Not
I'm
because
gonna go back a little bit
to life. And yet, it is morally impermissible to kill tree lobsters.
Well, it would be legally impermissible. It wouldn't be morally. I guess morally you could still say that it's fine to do so if it's threatening you. But I don't know if a tree lobster has that capacity. I don't know. I don't even know what the animal is.
Not because they have a right to life, but because they are an endangered species. If they were just as common as ants, then we'd probably also drown them with Nerf water guns.
Well, the reason why you would need to prevent ants inside your home is because, one, they damage the infrastructure, right? And when they burrow into your house, like they're literally have to like chew through the woods. It's mostly termites are going to do that, but ants to an extent can too. So ants are also eating the food around you, right? So the ants are damaging your environment and they're eating any food that you leave out, right? So the ants are literally damaging your home. Like, you don't just randomly go out and kill ants. I mean, some people do. But in an infestation, there is a legitimate reason as to why you would need to kill that insect or that animal. So you don't kill ants if there's just some random anthill on the sidewalk, although some people do. Like, that's mostly what kids do, honestly. Like, kids will do that, but eventually, you know, they stop. Versus, again, okay, I'd be repeating myself.
I never did.
I was going to say, like, in comparison to, like, you know, the moral obligation you have to other humans, I was going to say.
That when I was 7. Some friend told me that they did that when they were 7. This shows that there are facts external to the tree lobster, such as the biological...
The fuck is a tree lobster? Hold on, bro. I know it's irrelevant, honestly, but I'm curious now. What is a tree lobster? This? I'm disappointed. I thought it was gonna be like a lobster. I'm gonna be honest with you. Oh wait, hold on. Hold on. I mean, I guess it's what's this? The head, thorax? No, abdomen, thorax. I guess it's thorax. No, lobsters have tails. I don't really have like a thorax. Do I have my insect anatomy correct? Head, abdomen, thorax, right? The thorax is the back of them. Let me see. Thorax. Am I correct here? See if I remember grade school. I guess that's the thorax for a human, huh? Okay. Or is the abdomen the back of an insect, huh? Maybe I have it mixed up. Let me see. Yep, I had it mixed up. Thorax is their body's, abdomen is the back. So I guess it has a similar abdomen to a lobster, but whatever.
Ecosystem and their relationship to it that influence the permissibility of killing them. It's not just about the rights a tree lobster has, or the lack of rights in this case. Neither newborns nor fetuses are an endangered species, but just like tree lobsters, there are non-intrinsic facts about them that are relevant to moral claims about them.
I don't think this works because, again, endangered species is a legal term. It's not a moral one.
Theorizing.
I mean, what obligation does any environment have to making sure that an organism doesn't go extinct? Or to what extent does a human have to make sure an organism doesn't go extinct?
About permissible treatment of fetuses and newborns, we cannot simply look at their intrinsic features. We cannot consider fetuses and newborns in isolation. Context matters. In the same manner, as soon as a baby is born, it stands in a complex relation to many people, whereas pre-birth, it had a unique single relationship with the pregnant parent.
That's just not true. That's not true. Okay. For one, there's still a father involved. Now, you would have to assume that there is no father involved, but regardless of the location of the born baby and the fetus, it still has a relationship with its grandparents because it's still a human. It's just developing inside the mother. That's just a natural consequence of its existence. Like, it's not Schrodinger's like baby. Just that statement isn't true. Hold on. Maybe I misunderstood.
Pre-birth, it had
a
unique single relationship with the pregnant parent.
I guess physically that would be true, right? So hold on.
It stands in a complex relation to many people, whereas...
But, so these two statements aren't contradictory, actually. Because it still had a unique relationship with its mother, but it still had moral value to its father. If its father is present, which he should be, if the woman picked correctly. So, I mean, if that be the case... Okay, continue. Well, we're almost done.
It had a unique single relationship with the pregnant parent. A fetus is a part of its parent, and its relationship with others were mere potential.
I don't think, that's not true. It's attached to its parent, but it's not a part of it. It's inside the womb, connected to the mother, but it's not a part of the mother. I mean, I guess the umbilical cord is. Unless you want to argue that, like, the fetus is a separate organism to the mother. But it's not, because it's entirely designed to be detached from it, from its mom, at least. But that's still not true. The fetus's relationship to its father is not potential. I mean, it's necessary for it to exist. It's not biologically attached to its father, but the fetus is still its father's child. It can't be anything but that.
A born part of its unique single relationship with the pregnant parent. A fetus is a part of its parent, and its relationship with others were mere potential. But a born baby solidifies its place in social relations. Pregnancy is the only relationship where providing one being, the fetus, with medical care for its benefit is impossible to do without also doing something to the pregnant parent. You literally cannot perform operations, checkups, or prescribe medication for the fetus without the cooperation and consent of the pregnant parent, unless you force them to comply against their will. But once the baby is born, it gains independence. It branches out from this unique single relationship. The moral context has changed. The reason why so many discussions overlook the moral significance of birth is because the mainstream outlook on moral rights theory rests on two assumptions. First, when discussing who has what moral right, the justifications revolve around intrinsic properties. When you look at and listen to abortion discussions, the right to life debate is always about what does a fetus or an adult essentially have? Do you have a conscious concept of self? Are your organs able to keep you alive independently? Do you have hands? These are all intrinsic properties. Relational social properties, such as being loved, being part of a social community, or a biological ecosystem, these are rarely cited as relevant to the discussion. And I definitely...
Because they are irrelevant to the discussion. It doesn't matter. If someone is unloved, it doesn't mean they don't have a right to live. It doesn't matter if a person was born in the wilderness and raised by wolves. It doesn't change in principle that you don't get to kill another human, regardless of its location, without some just cause, without some reason for it. You can't just kill your child because you're poor. You get more money. But it's hard to get more money. Yeah, of course it's hard to get more money. That doesn't mean you kill your children. Like, I'm jumping through it, like, and I get it, like, I do get it, like easier said than done. But this is why we have principles. This is why we have grit. This is why we have to stand by. This is what integrity and honor is all about. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's a tough decision. Yeah, it's gonna make you feel bad at the time. That's why you have to be mentally strong. So you don't get to throw your hands up as a young lady and say, I can't do this, so I don't have any obligation. That's not how that shit works. And I think one of the biggest problems I have is we teach young women that, you can't do something, don't try. No. You have an obligation to your children. You do. Tough shit, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. Life is hard. That doesn't mean that logically we can conclude that you don't have an obligation to your children. You brought them into this world. You had sex. They exist because of your actions. They are a literal result of everything you decide to do. Now, if Jimmy is a piece of shit and he doesn't want to come raise his child, you picked him. And Jimmy, if Karen is an asshole, you picked her. You guys don't get to say, I don't want to raise a child because you're an asshole. That's not how that works. In no other circumstance would that be an acceptable argument. In no other circumstance would that make sense. And yet, for some reason, we're supposed to accept it when it comes to our children? I don't know. I think that doesn't make sense.
Definitely think.
Honestly, yeah. No, honestly, guys, you're 100% correct. I'm gonna be 100% honest. Yeah, this is getting long. Let's wrap up her Let's give her conclusion, and we're gonna end this stream. I got a super chat. Yo, it's CJ. The woman on screen is very attractive. I'm going to stand on her side. LOJK, great stream. Yo, man, you didn't have to give me a super chat, but I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you. You really didn't have to, but I appreciate it all the same. Thank you, man.
They should be. Second is the single criterion assumption, which assumes that there is one key property that determines whether something has moral rights or not. People try really hard to come up with one special cutoff point where before it, abortion is totally okay, but after it, it's completely evil. Or
well, yes, and I think that's the problem. The problem is it becomes arbitrary rather than a principle. Like it's based on just different things that you could just different conditions rather than the whole of the sum. And that's kind of one thing I really don't like about it. I'm going to let her finish. I'm sorry.
How a single right must prevail. It's always either right to life is the key property, or right to bodily autonomy is what truly matters. This single criterion assumption doesn't allow for the possibility of a variety of sound reasons for ascribing moral rights. It doesn't allow us to say, hey, let's look at intrinsic rights, but let's also look at relationships to family and to society at large. Abortion discussions can get frustrating when you feel like you hear the same arguments over and over again. Hopefully through this video, you might have come across something new. If you didn't get enraged by this video, you can like and sub.
I mean, I didn't get enraged. All right. Tier Zoo, that's interesting. All right, so I guess, guys, my friends, in conclusion, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, it's very impromptu, very random. Hopefully all my live streams aren't going to be just random. Maybe I can be a little bit more consistent. I was going to upload a new video today, but, like I said, I got to like 10 minutes and decided to react to it. So I'll end the stream with a summation of how I feel, and in the future I'll definitely make some more shorter videos about this stuff for you guys and for other viewers that didn't see it. But my principle is one of simplicity. Premise 1, a fetus is a human being because it cannot be anything but that. Premise 2, it is wrong to kill a human being without just cause. Conclusion, abortions are wrong. There you go. I don't think that a just cause is poverty. I don't think a just cause is inconvenience, because these conditions can be changed. And if these conditions can be changed, then it doesn't mean that you impart a condition that cannot be changed, which is death. Not simply just a parent can work to get better education. Again, difficult as it may be. And I'm not saying, listen, none of this stuff is easy, Well, sometimes it can be, but for the most part, maybe none of this stuff is easy. But this stuff is possible. And in a world where this stuff is possible, I do not think that the logical conclusion is you get to kill your child. I'm sorry, your fetus while it's inside of you. I don't think that that's a reasonable conclusion any person could really make. Again, if a mother's life is in danger, I think that would be just cause, because at that point both people are going to die. But even to that extent, I mean, we had a commenter here say that his child was producing antibodies that was killing his wife, and she still stuck it out. I mean, to that I don't know. That's a tough one. At the same, I think to that extent that would make sense to give the option. But if your fetus isn't killing you literally, then I don't think it's reasonable. I really can't conclude that it's reasonable to kill your fetus, even if you're poor. Even if there are genetic abnormalities. I don't think a difficult life is just cause to kill someone. I don't think it's reasonable to create arbitrary definitions for what makes someone or that makes a person, because at that point you're not even speaking English anymore. You're just speaking a different language. Before we conclude, someone asked a question. 2 links. I had a question to float to you that pro-choicers still are pro-lifers, but that could be for another stream. If you're still here, hurry up and ask the question. I'll wait a couple of minutes. Well, I'll wait a minute or so. Hopefully you can hear me here. Go ahead and ask your question, and then we can close the stream out. I'll wait to see if you're still here. The issue is it's backwards. People do it out of convenience and rationalize it through whatever argument after. Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah. I think that's one thing that really irks me is the vast majority of the reason why abortions are done are not medical, it's not genetic, and it's not rape. It is absolutely convenience. And that bothers me. Because if the vast majority of the reason is out of convenience, then its conclusion cannot be defended with the what's the word I'm looking for? With the particular circumstances. If the main reason that we see abortions are consistently done out of convenience, I don't think it's fair to say, well, we need them because, this X could happen. Because that's not why they're being used. So if you agree that life begins at conception, and apparently a lot of fertilized eggs fail to implant, would you consider that a loss of life? Yes, by definition. But I mean, we can't control that. Honestly, I've seen this. I'm going to end the stream with this. I've heard a lot of people bring up fertilized eggs and zygotes, and it's totally irrelevant because a zygote and a fertilized egg is not being aborted. Game, set, match. If anyone brings it up, you just respond with that's not what gets aborted in an abortion. So there's no point in bringing it up. If a zygote fails to implant, I mean then it just failed to implant. That's not a conscious choice anyone made. You wouldn't have known that it happened. And as a mother, or as a woman, I guess you're not technically a mother. You wouldn't have known that that's what happened. But a fetus is an abortion is a conscious choice. You have a fetus. You know it's growing. You know what's happening. And you decide to pay someone, a surgeon, to remove it. Or you get like an abortion pill, say it's early on. You know it's there. So to compare a fetus to a zygote is totally baseless. It's irrelevant and it has nothing to do with the conversation. So it really annoys me when people, and I'm not saying you, by the way, too, like not you, but like when I've seen this a lot, and if you guys want, there's this old video I made, I think it was like 2 or 3 parts response to Philosophy Tube, where I was arguing, and he brought it up, and I had to say the same thing. You wouldn't know that a zygote didn't implant inside of you, so it's irrelevant to bring it up. The question is, can you abort a fetus? When you have the knowledge, you know it's there, you know what sex does, you know what's going to happen. I would conclude no, you don't have that right. I don't think a woman has a right to kill a child inside of her. That's how I feel. So all right, you guys. With that being said, man, I certainly hope you guys got something out this live stream. If you did, man, go and click the like button. You should go and click that subscribe button. You guys already subscribed, man, but go ahead and comment in the comment box below. You guys have yourselves a great day. Adios.